All right, welcome everybody to our City Council workshop for Tuesday, February 20, 2018. And let the record show that the entire council is present for this workshop, so welcome everybody. First item is our DS items, which is DS 18-015, discuss agenda items for the regular City Council meeting for February 27, 2018, that being next week. And first thing is our minutes, MN 18-004. Consider minutes of regular City Council meeting of February 13, 2018. Any questions or comments on those? All right, seeing none, we're just going to go ahead and move on to item number 8, RS 18-005. Consider memorandum resolution approving the investment report for the quarter ending December 31st, 2017. And Mr. Locke, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. Valley View Consulting is the city's contracted investment consultant, and Emily Upshaw is here this evening to present the first quarter of fiscal year 2018 investment report. Ms. Upshaw.
All right, welcome, Mrs. Upshaw.
Evening, Mayor and Council. I'm filling in for Susan Anderson this evening. She'll be back for your council meeting. But I did want to take you through your quarterly investment report. On this first page, we have your summary of the quarter end. So this is comparing where you are at September 30th and where you are at as December 31st. Overall, your portfolio total increased $35.2 million. Majority of that is related to your property tax revenue. So this is about the time of year when every investment advisor wants to get up and talk in front of their clients. This is when you're bringing in your cash. So we'll look at getting those funds invested. Your total portfolio is at 1.35% for this quarter. Over on the right-hand side, you'll see that we have fiscal year-to-date yields, but they're the same. This is Q1, so your fiscal year-to-date is going to be the exact same. Overall, your interest income is $253,000. Just for comparison, prior quarter you were at $203,000. So you've earned $50,000 more this quarter. And a lot of that's related to your portfolio yield. Prior quarter you were at 1.15%, so you've gone up 20 basis points. Some of that's related to the market movement. The Federal Open Market Committee did raise rates in December, so that helped boost some of your positions. This next page, we always focus on the top left chart, the Treasury yield curves. The blue line is the current quarter that we're looking at, December 31st. It's well above the lines for the previous quarter and 1 year ago, and that's related to the Federal Open Market Committee raising rates in December. So we see a boost in those short-term rates. As you can see, as you go out longer term, those rates flatten. So we always keep your investments about 2 years and under, because there's no point in going out and taking more risk. You're not getting enough return for that. So we keep them about 2 years and below. All right, page 3, we have your investment holdings. Broken record, everything above that blank line in the middle are your liquid assets. Everything below isn't currently invested in CDs. On the far right, the last two columns, you'll see your life is 166 days. So compared to prior quarter, it was 129. So that indicates that we've placed some investments. It's not anything to be concerned about. We want to see that WAM go up because you'll actually see your yield increase. Okay. Page 4, this just shows your portfolio composition on the top left. The securities and CDs, it was at 50% last quarter. So that's increased to 56% because staff made some investments to help your yield. The total portfolios, it's a little difficult to see, but December is typically a time of year, November and December for Killeen is when we see the city bring in the tax revenue. So you'll see an increase in your total portfolio. And then finally, the bottom chart shows the portfolio performance. Some benchmarks we have on there are the T-bills and text pool. We're still above those, and that's what we want to continue seeing. Page 5, we have your book value comparison. So this is taking prior quarter of September 30th, showing any purchases, any money movement in or interest paid, as well as any maturities or money movement out, and is reaching the December 31st numbers. In this quarter, you didn't actually have any maturities, so we have that blank column. But everything next to that, you'll see that you had either money movement in, a lot of that related to your tax revenue. You'll see Techstar just before that blank line That increased significantly. That was where a lot of your tax revenue was coming in. We're placing investments as we have cash available and as we identify those opportunities. You did place 4 new investments that you'll see towards the bottom. There was a $4 million placement, a $5 million placement, about $12 million, and about $2.5 million placements. The next page, this shows the same information. It's showing market value, but because you're invested in CDs, your book value equals your market value, so there's actually no difference between this page and the prior page, but we just have to show it. Then finally, we get to your allocations. This just shows how your portfolio is divvied up, where all the investments lie. You're actually using a pooled investment strategy that really gives you the ability to place more investments so your cash isn't sitting by idly. So that's really working well for you, and you have a very nice ladder set up with all those CD placements. So we're looking to have the same strategy continue. And then we have prior quarter numbers so that you can look at the differences from here and now. Short and sweet.
All right, any
Any
questions for Mrs. Upshaw? None, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 9, RS 18-006, consider memorandum resolution to hold a joint general election with KISD. Mrs. Davis.
The item before you now is to discuss the joint election agreements between the City of Killeen and the Killeen Independent School District. The City of Killeen and KISD will both hold elections on May 5th. School districts are required to hold a joint election with the city or the county whenever possible. And when conducting a joint election, the entities are required to enter into a joint election agreement laying out each entity's responsibilities and costs. Today, we are presenting to you 2 separate agreements, one for early voting and one for election day voting. There are 2 main benefits to conducting a joint election. The first, and I think the most important, is voter convenience. It does allow voters to cast ballots in one voting location. And an additional benefit is the shared election costs for each of the entities. The election expenses will initially be paid by the City of Killeen, and KISD will reimburse the city for 1/2 of the shared election day costs. Total election cost will be approximately $50,000, and the city's portion has been budgeted. Staff recommends that the City Council approve the early voting and election day joint election agreements with KISD and authorize the city manager to enter into those agreements. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mrs. Davis? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 10, RS 18-007, consider memorandum resolution to approve an addendum to the original maintenance agreement between the City of Killeen and Tyler Technologies for municipal court case management software. And Mrs. Posey, welcome.
Good evening, Council, Mayor, City Manager. I'm before you tonight with an addendum to the original contract between the City of Killeen and Tyler Technologies. The original contract that we entered into in 2014 included a maintenance agreement which automatically renews for a term of 1 year. In accordance with that agreement, there could be up to a 5% increase annually every year, and there has been an increase of 5% annually every year. So this year, before it automatically renewed, we reached out to Tyler Technologies and asked them if they could find a way to reduce either the increase or reduce the amount of maintenance, the cost of the maintenance. What they came back with was 2 addendums to the original agreement. The first addendum is a 5-year maintenance agreement, which includes a maximum of 2% increase annually, and then a 3-year maintenance agreement that includes an annual increase of 3% annually, capped at 3%. Funding for the purchase of a maintenance agreement was included in the FY 2018 budget. This purchase does exceed $50,000, and an addendum is required. I should mention that what we get for our maintenance agreement is unlimited help desk service. We get all of our updates and upgrades and fixes are all included in the maintenance agreement. Because we're considered a large court, Once a year, the Tyler Technologies sends a team of representatives to come and kind of do a review of our business practices. And we make recommendations as to what we would like to see in the software going forward, and they take our recommendations. This past year, we have about 3 or 4 recommendations that we made that will be made during the coming year. So we considered several alternatives. The 5-year maintenance agreement, capped at 2%, is a savings of about $30,920 over a period of 5 years. The 3-year maintenance agreement would save the city about $16,688 over a period of 3 years. With the 3-year agreement, after 3 years, the maintenance is either going to revert back to 5%, or you'll have to go back in and renegotiate another deal. Or we could keep the contract as it is and incur a 5% annual increase, up to a 5% annual increase every year. Staff recommends that we select the 5-year maintenance agreement with a capped 2% increase over a 5-year period to save the maximum amount of money. The court and the city doesn't have any plans on changing our court software anytime in the future, so a 5-year maintenance agreement would suit us just fine. Staff recommends that council authorize the city manager to sign an addendum for a 5-year maintenance agreement and authorize annual payment for the term of that agreement. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for staff? Mr. Harris?
Yes, sir.
I just have to ask, I mean, is there an eventual cap on the percentage increases? I mean, because it seems like every year for forever is like a whole lot.
Yeah. They have not said that there will ever be a cap. That's a question that I can ask, though. I don't have that answer now, but I can have it for you
Please do,
for
because
next week.
eventually, it's like we may have to go
Yeah.
back shopping again if it just keeps going up and up and up every single year. Now, the 2%, of course, the deal, like I said, I mean, that's a good deal right there. So, I mean, that's obvious, but still, is that forever?
Okay.
Yeah.
I can get an answer to that
Okay,
question, sir.
thank you, ma'am.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Ms. Posey.
Thank you.
Next item is RS 18-008, consider memorandum resolution appointing students to the Youth Advisory Commission. Mr. Williams, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council, Mr. City Manager. The item before you is to consider the appointments of students to the Youth Advisory Commission. A little brief history, the Youth Advisory Commission was created in 1993 to serve as a liaison body to the Killeen City Council. Their statement is to provide the youth of our community opportunities through volunteerism and service by taking initiatives that are directed toward effective change. Notable projects are their youth conference, President's Volunteer Service Awards, and Family Volunteer Day. The YC is comprised of 37 members. There's currently 15 vacancies on the Youth Advisory Commission, and the list before you today features 13 students that are being recommended for appointment. I will not read all those, but they're before you right there. And staff recommends appointing the aforementioned members to the Youth Advisory Commission for the 17-18 year, and I'll take any questions.
Any questions? Mr. Johnson?
Will there ever be a time when the Youth Advisory Commission is actually advising the council on issues that are important to their generation? I see the annual report, and I think the young people are doing an outstanding job, but I fear sometimes that they're always being used as free labor. And so it's important that we mentor and grow them. That's the reason why we appoint them to that position. I can't be everywhere. Every night I go to sleep, I wake up, I'm a day older, and the gap is growing between our young people and the members of the council. And so I think it's important that we hear from them and understand those issues.
I think this body could change the direction or expand the direction. At your discretion, we can make that happen. We just need the guidance and we can do it, but we can also explore some things at our level to address what you're talking about.
Thank you.
Mrs. Nash King?
Thank you, sir. Mr. Williams, when will you fill the 15 vacancies?
Well, there's 2 remaining. This will fill 13 of the 15, and the other 2, I was talking to Roxanne about that earlier today. You'll probably see those, if I had to speculate without Roxanne giving me a definitive answer, I would say probably within 60 days is probably a reasonable time. But they're potential candidates. She was telling me earlier, the difference is they can be involved and participate, they just will not be official voting members until they're actually appointed by this body. And so they could, it's a strong possibility that they will be functioning at full capacity, but they'll have two people that can't vote.
Okay, and the youth, when they do these volunteer hours, they use these hours for scholarships to apply for colleges and things of that nature. And it also gives them experience, work experience with interacting with the community. So they do great work, and those skills, those communication skills, those interaction skills, those social skills are what they are learning from YAC. So they volunteer to learn those skills, and I think that is a great opportunity to, hopefully, that we can increase the numbers of YAC members to allow more students and youth to get involved with community volunteering. And it starts there.
Yes, ma'am.
Great job.
Thank you.
Mrs. Fleming?
I have one question, or just to advise you what has happened. I went to Killeen High School. I met with the principal there, and she has gotten 2 of her students to come and be on my advisory, my District 1 advisory board. So I do have 2 youths at the Killeen High School that are now coming to my.
Mr. Mayor, apologize to interrupt, but the audience do not hear what they're saying, so they would like them to use the speaker.
Couldn't you hear me, sir?
And I'm sorry, I forgot to remind you, because we are recording these.
Okay.
Remember.
I just wanted to say that involving some of the youth, I visit with the principal at Killeen High School, and she has, at my last advisory meeting with Mr. Olson was there, she sent a student to be there to learn about city government, everything that goes on in the city, to be a volunteer and to be involved. So every month, they're going to send 2 students to my District 1 Advisory Board to get involved with the youth. So we are doing something in our district to bring the youth in, to show them about our city government.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? All right. Item number 12, RS 18-009, consider memorandum resolution authorizing a contract with Commercial Swim Management for the renovation of the Family Aquatics Center. Mr. Williams.
Yes, sir, Mayor, City Council, Mr. Manager. The item before you is to consider an agreement with Commercial Swim Management to replace the Plaster at the Family Aquatic Center. A little brief history. Family Aquatic Center opened in the summer of 2009. We're open Memorial Day to Labor Day each year. Annually, we bring in about $400,000 in revenue based on our last 5 years of revenue figures, about 60,000 visitors on an annual basis. The maintenance issues that we're dealing with is deteriorating plaster. For those who are not familiar, plaster is basically the surface of the pools, the interior surface. It's a safety and welfare issue to patrons. Last year, during our inspection by our insurance provider, Texas Municipal League, excuse me, we were advised that failure to make this adjustment this year could result in us not receiving our ride certificates for our 2018 swim season, so it's a very important maintenance issue that we need to address. Prospective vendors, you can see before you, Commercial Swim Management was the lowest at $167,000, $167,509.43. The next lowest potential service provider was Progressive Commercial Aquatics. 3 of these potential service providers were from the buy board, and 1 was a non-buy board service provider, so we want to venture outside and make sure we're getting the best possible value. The proposed capital improvement plan, it'll utilize $167,509 of $350,000 that was approved in the fiscal year 18 budget to do improvements to the Family Aquatic Center, to include the plaster and an audit and subsequent improvements to our pump room. Here's some pictures of the failing plaster, and this is in our kiddie play area, and you can see it's just basically chipping and detaching from the surface. And with that being said, staff's recommending, excuse me, the city utilize the buy board cooperative to enter an agreement with Commercial Swim Management in the amount of $167,509.43 to correct the plaster failing that we have at the Family Aquatic Center.
Mrs. Nash King.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Williams?
Yes, ma'am.
I know it's the cheaper price, but have you looked at some of the research on the background on this company?
Yes, ma'am. We use them for Long Branch Pool, but also what we did, we reached out to an aquatics advisor. I call him an aquatics advisor. And so what we did is we drew the specs to make sure they were identical, and so we could make sure that we got the product and the product and the procedure done apples to apples by all the potential vendors. And so we got that. And then we also checked their references, and they all came back positive.
Thank you.
Mr. Okry.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Williams, so you give us an average annual revenue for 5 years. Is it possible to give a revenue for 5 years? Instead of an average, a median?
The total.
A median for each year,
That's
per
the.
year.
Yeah, that's the average. You're saying, let me make sure I understand your question, I'm
The
sorry.
last 5 years.
Yes, sir.
Year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay.
The
Oh, okay.
the revenue for
Gotcha.
5 years. And also for the visitors, is this on an average or is this at?
Average.
I want to see a 5 years.
All right.
Got it.
Mr. Rivera.
Mr. Williams,
Sir.
that report that we just asked for, can you please forward me a copy as well?
I'll send it to the city manager's office.
Please.
Yes, sir, and they'll distribute it to
And
everyone.
I just want to thank you for the job you do in your level, because every time, especially a town like Killeen, where we got so many military coming in, one of the bigger things they look for is the quality of life for their family when they come in to a city. And if you know the history about 15, 20 years ago, we didn't have a park where kids used to play, and we used to use the KISD backyard to use our own. So I thank you for the quality of life you bring into our city. I mean, second to none, and I hope we continue to support you in that area.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Mr. Kilpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Williams, what is about an average life of the plaster repair? Are we anticipating that we're going to have around 130 to 175K each year for plaster, or is this every 3 years or what?
8 to 10 years.
8 to 10
Yes,
years,
sir.
we would see this as a reoccurring
Yes,
type
sir.
event. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mrs. Fleming.
Question, Mr. Williams, maybe I missed it in here, looking so fast. When is the work going to start on this?
Once the council approves it, we're hoping to be started within 30 days. We've
In
let the
30
company
days
know.
from the time we approve this?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And we have this in the budget?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
Your
you so
FY
much.
'18. Yes, ma'am.
I knew you did, I just wanted to hear you say that.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Mr. Harris.
As far on the warranty limitations, when it talks about settling or shifting, what's the general, what's the general, I guess, thing we look for in settling or shifting that is acceptable? Or, I mean, is there any danger of like when it talks about the hairline cracks and stuff like that, you'll generally see from the settling and the shifting and all that stuff like that. But is there a point where, or I'll just ask the question, has there ever been a time where the pool actually cracked more than it should have, or anything like that happens? And if something like that does happen, then what's our direction on that one? If it does crack in the way that we think is a little bit, extensive than what a normal crack is?
Well, that would be beyond the scope of the work that the company will be providing for this. They're going to provide a product to us that's going to be guaranteed against peeling, cracking, to the extent that it will be normal wear and tear on the plaster, but a shift related to the foundation, that would be out of their scope because they're not doing any foundation work
Okay.
to solidify that. Coming up on 10 years, I would hope that it's as settled as it would be, but that's just pure speculation. There's no way of telling how much shifting may occur out there.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
All right. I think that's it. Anybody else? Good item. We had a big discussion on that one, Mr. Williams. You're done.
Thank you, sir.
Item number 13, RS 18-010, consider memorandum resolution approving an agreement with Amadeus Airport IT Americas, Inc., for the installation and implementation of shared use and flight information display system software and hardware at the Killeen Fort Hood Regional Airport. Mr. Van Valkenburg, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Council, City Manager, and City Attorney. As you read, Mr. Mayor, this is a contract to upgrade our common use passenger processing system and flight information displays. An RFP was approved for use by Council in August of 2017. We released in November of 2017. It was received in December of 2017 and then evaluated by a technical committee in December 2017. The technical committee then selected Amadeus Airport IT as the preferred provider. Staff has negotiated an agreement with Amadeus, which includes all equipment, installation, testing, and training. It also includes a 4-year software and maintenance support for the sum of $726,285. This project is fully funded in the fiscal year 18 budget. We had some alternatives. One was to use our existing PFC funding to provide a campus solution for the existing cups and fids. However, it is not as complete as the system that we're getting. Or 2, we could upgrade the existing system, which is not campus-wide. Or 3, we could just abandon the project. We did recommend alternative number 1. The project was approved by both the airlines and the FAA. It is a fully funded PFC project, therefore we're using no airport enterprise funds. This is the most suitable and cost-effective system for the airport and provides the best value for the city and the airport. Thus, staff recommends that council authorize the city manager to execute the agreement with said company, as well as any and all change orders or supplemental agreements within the amount set by state and local law. I'll answer any questions you may have.
Questions for staff? All right, seeing none, you're good.
Thank you, sir.
Item number 14, RS 18-011, consider memorandum resolution awarding bid number 18-08 for a construction contract with Bruce Flanagan Construction, Inc. to construct the septic tank elimination project. That's the STEP phase number 10 project. Mr. Olson, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you mentioned, this is an item for the septic tank elimination program. We're going to refer to that as STEP from here going forward. Phase 10 construction contract. This program dates back to 2002, and we've completed 9 total phases. Phase 9 had 2 separate parts to it. It was an A and a B. To date, we've completed the design for Phase 10, and Phase 10 proposes bringing 101 homes in the Tucker subdivision off of Clear Creek Road. It's Clear Creek Rentals, located at 6000 South Clear Creek Road, onto the city sewer system. 4 contractors submitted bids for this project, and Bruce Flanagan was the low responsive and responsible bidder in the amount of $673,673. Funding for this project is available in the Water and Sewer 2013 bonds. What you see on this slide is just an example of what happens when they abandon a septic tank. Basically, they would pump that septic tank dry, fill it with sand and cement, then smash the lid that goes on top of it and cover it back up. The house would then be connected to the new city sewer system that would be located in the public right-of-way adjacent to that home. And at that point, they would start paying a monthly fee to the city for wastewater services. The alternatives considered, 1, were to discontinue the STEP program. We feel that this is not a viable option, as it has greatly enhanced the quality of life as well as water quality in our area. Another option is to choose an alternative site for the STEP program. Again, we've already got our design done, and we have a commitment from the property owner to bring all 101 residences on board with this project, so we feel that this is a good time to award a construction contract for STEP Phase 10 to Bruce Flanagan. With that, city staff recommends that the city council authorize the city manager to award a construction contract to Bruce Flanagan in the amount of $673,673, and I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Mr. Kilpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to commend the staff for their excellent work in continuing this very vital project, not only for the city, but also for the citizens, to give a better quality of life to the investment that we put in. It's investment into the property owner's property also for them to take advantage of. Mr. Olson's staff has done an outstanding job in the previous 9, and I'd just like to commend them for what they're doing in this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And this one's a good one because you get what, 100% participation in this one?
We get 100% participation, and the way our participation works, the property owner pays 50% or a one-time, it's around $1,800 fee to make that connection. If that septic system were to go out on them in the future and they had to make the connection themselves, it would likely cost them north of $5,000. So it's a win-win in that we get a new quality connection to our sewer system, and the property owner is able to prevent future maintenance costs.
There you go. Anybody else? All right, thank you. Next item, number 15, RS 18-012, consider memorandum resolution awarding bid number 18-04 for a construction contract to James Construction Group, LLC, to construct Rosewood Drive Extension and Heritage Oak Hike and Bike Trail, segment number 3 and 4 project. Mr. Olson.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. I have to say this one is somewhat of a milestone for me. I started working on this project day one when I came to the city, and I've spent the better part of the last 2 years working on it, and I'm glad to bring a construction contract to you today. This project includes the construction of Rosewood Drive from its current terminus, about 6/10 of a mile to the south and connecting into Chaparral Road. That includes a bridge over Tremere Creek. It also includes a hike and bike trail that runs from Chaparral Road north to Purser Family Park, and then another hike and bike trail that runs from the Tremere Creek crossing at Rosewood north and west to Platinum Drive. This project closes a gap that connects from IH-14 south to Chaparral Road. It's going to help provide us an additional south loop around the city. 4 contractors submitted bids on January 31st, and James Construction Group came in as the low bidder at $7,826,151.27. We were very excited about that bid, as our original project estimate was around $10.5 million based on a 12-month rolling average, and it just goes to show you that construction prices are doing well right now. Funding for the project is available in the 2018 governmental CIP budget, and I'd just like to note that the funding for this project will be paid for 80% by federal funding through the federal and state funding through the Federal Highways Administration and TxDOT. The city will provide a 20% match up to the $11.2 million total. So if we do have any change orders that go over, those are still an 80-20 split above this $7.8 million award. What you see here is just a depiction of what I described earlier. You see Rosewood connecting south to Chaparral and the 2 trails running north and northwest. There are 3 alternatives to consider here. The first alternative is to reject bids and abandon the project. This does forfeit our federal funding, and we're not recommending that route. Second alternative would be to rescope and rebid the project to eliminate certain aspects or potentially add in additional aspects if we so chose. Again, this alternative would likely forfeit federal funding, and we are not recommending that route as well. The third option that we are recommending is to award a construction contract to James Construction Group. This will secure our federal funding and allow the project to move forward. With that, city staff recommends that we award a construction contract in the amount of $7,826,151.27 to James Construction Group, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions, Mr. Johnson?
Did city staff vet James Construction Group prior to recommending approval?
Yes, we did, and we worked with James Construction Group on our PTF project, 190, 2410 in Rosewood. What I will say is that their familiarity with TxDOT type projects such as this one is very thorough. They know the specifications, they know the type of work, and the quality of work that they performed on the project was very detailed as well. There have been some concerns raised with certain references, and they had some history with TxDOT, but we feel that those issues are cleaned up well now, and see no reason to hesitate in awarding this contract to them.
Okay, I'm glad you said that. I had a citizen send me an email this afternoon, and they had some concerns, and so they asked me, I searched online, the citizen wanted to speak today, but they're not here yet, so I guess they'll get the opportunity next Tuesday to speak, but on January 2nd, 2018, there was a wrongful death lawsuit filed against James Construction Group for a project that they were over in Texarkana, and then I saw another article for February 9th where the Harris County put a hold on their construction project because of multiple violations and complaints. So if If I send these to you, can you look into those just to make sure before we vote next Tuesday?
Definitely, and as I said, we are aware that they do have some blemishes from a record standpoint, but I'll say that the work that they've done for the city of Killeen has been great, and TxDOT is continuing to award projects to them at this time, and TxDOT will have to concur with our award as well. So I think assuming all of those things occur, that we're in good shape moving forward with this contract.
Thank you.
Mr. Rivera.
Let me get back to piggyback on with Mr. Johnson. Is there any way possible that you could check and see, if you don't know at this time, what took place in that incident that generated a lawsuit? If you know anything about it, we would like that to be disclosed.
Will do.
Mr. Harris.
I was going along the same lines as Councilman Johnson, because I know in 2015, I know that TxDOT basically had to kind of look at them and evaluate them because they had such a heavy load. 2016, they rescinded quite a few contracts from them. 2017, that I saw May 25th, 2017, they have some contracts as well that seem pretty extensive. But I guess the question now is, even as I guess TxDOT had that concern about the load they had at that point in time, have we confirmed that the load they have now is not too heavy for them to be able to do what they need to do for us on time?
Yeah, yes, we can, and the immediate indicator in that is that the bid being well under our expected engineer's estimate, which has been disclosed to all of the bidders. So they were well aware how much money we were expecting to have to spend going into it, and their bid was still well under, indicating that their workload is not that it used to be. So they are in need of work, and that indicates they should be more capable of accomplishing a greater deal of work at this time.
So I was looking at the screen here that I have, and like I said, unless I'm looking at it wrong, I mean, there's a few things on here. So I just wanted to make sure that we're looking into that as well. But even with the concerns that they brought up as well, then like I said, I should just like some overall, like I said, confirmation that everything is good all around, basically.
Understand.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Mrs. Fleming.
Mr. Olson, due to the fact that today is Tuesday, this is coming about next week for us to vote on this company. Is there any way possible, and I know it might be rushing you, if you get the information about this company to let us know before it's brought up for us to vote on?
Yes, ma'am, and what I'll say is we have looked into the
Okay.
company, and we're aware of the issues that are out there.
Right.
And my recommendation is still that we move forward with James Construction Group, despite what's on this paper. What I can say is the next low bid was TTG Utilities. It was 8.1 to 8.2 million. I forget exactly the dollar amount, but we're talking approximately $400,000.
I understand that, but what I'm thinking is that we have to look at our constituents. A lot of people have called us about this company. They read too, they know what's going on. So voting yes to this and something goes down the pike and something happens, then we are going to be liable for this because we voted for this. And if we get a chance, to get the information and everything, be fine. All we want to do is just to be transparent to our citizens. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And I just want to say that, I know they did our 190, but they also did the Tremere. Didn't they do the Tremere project, or is that somebody else?
No, McLean Construction did the Tremere project. They did 190, and James Construction Group did I-35 construction from Salado through Temple. So all of the construction there, the flyover and Belton from I-35 to 190 I-14 was one of their projects as well.
Mr. Okrie.
Yes, thank you. We all slept at a Holiday Inn last night, I guess, because we're all got engineer certifications. But I think our concern is with the word of the contract. Am I not correct? So as far as the time, the work to be done, that's signed off by a civil engineer, I believe. So they're the ones on the line for that. So and if there's anything that comes up that they don't complete it on time, that's something that's negotiable as far as price is concerned. But as far as quality.
Correct. The quality would refer back to our civil engineering design. And then as well, what I'll say is This project has a very adequate time frame. It's a little over 800 days, total 800 calendar days to complete this work. I think that it can be done very easily inside of that time frame, and we will be stringent in holding that schedule accountable. We do have clauses in our contract that allow for liquidated damages should this project run over schedule.
Also, with this road, there's a bridge there, correct?
Yes.
And there is something that I believe we received earlier, not earlier, but last year, in regards to a park facility. And so that will be very critical infrastructure for people to get to and from that park. I believe this was the park, minus this, I believe the park was 15 million or something like that, minus the cost of the bridge. So we're that much closer to getting to a recreation facility that the citizens of the city is expecting us to come through and follow through on.
And just to clarify, this does include the construction of our Heritage Oaks Hike and Bike Trail improvements. That includes a trailhead at the intersection of Rosewood and Pyrite. There will be a parking area there so that citizens can drive to and park and then use that hike and bike trail up and down Tremere Creek and up and down Rosewood as well at their leisure.
Yeah, so this is something that we need to do for the citizens.
I feel strongly, yes.
Thank you.
Mrs. Nash King.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Olson, you have a lot of information that you have to bring back to the council. And come Tuesday, if we do not vote in this direction, I know we're on a tight timeline. What is the next step?
If we feel that there's more information needed, we have room in our timeline to delay this and do a little more digging. I am confident that I have answers to all of the questions I've received tonight that I'd like to put down in a formal memorandum format just to make sure that it's clear and concise and well-spoken. So I don't want to stumble through it here tonight trying to answer those questions. But I do feel I can answer them immediately and thoroughly.
All right. Mr. Harris.
I just have one more question. Hopefully it doesn't make anybody mad, though. But as far as the with the hike and bike trail, who's going to be responsible for putting in the lighting that goes down the trail and everything like that?
The lighting is going to be installed with this project.
Okay, so that's going to be included in there. And then as far as
the city will own that lighting once this project is done, but with this project, we install lights along the hike and bike trail about every, I think this one was 150 feet, maybe 125 feet, but it's between 100 and 200 feet. They're smaller, safety lighting, hike and bike trail lights.
Okay, I was going to ask the question, are you sure we could pay the electric bill? Because that was the reason we struck down streetlights in the first place in neighborhoods. Can we pay that bill? I'm done.
All right. Anybody else? All right, thank you, Mr. Olson.
Thank you.
Moving on to public hearing, item number 16, PH 18-005A. Hold a public hearing and consider an ordinance requested by Atkinson Home, Inc., Flume number 17-30, to amend the comprehensive plan's future land use map from suburban residential to general residential designated area for approximately 19.560 acres, being part of the T. Arnold Survey. Abstract number 55. The subject property is addressed as 7610 Clear Creek Road in Killeen, Texas. Mr. McElwain, welcome.
Yes, good evening, Mayor, City Council, Mr. Olson, Ms. Davis. This is the first of a two-part request. As the mayor mentioned, Atkinson Homes is looking to amend the future land use map for their approximate 20 acres of land at 7610 Clear Creek Road. For those of you who were on the council in 2012 or 2013, you may recall the city council directed staff to look at and evaluate the amount of suburban residential property in this part of the city. We did that and did a large-scale amendment. Atkinson Homes had property and at that time did not feel that it was warranted to have their property amended to general residential. They're here doing that now. The current designation does allow for a larger baseline minimum lot size and setbacks, and as you're aware, general residential allows for a different variety of housing types and densities than we have in suburban residential. In our presentation of the item to the city council, we highlighted the rectangular tract. I want to draw your attention to the color differentiation. The actual goldenrod color is actually more pervasive on the actual future land use map than what's shown on the PowerPoint. We're actually working to get that color symbology rectified, but the goldenrod color actually is along the western boundary of this tract to the north, which we have in the hue that we want. And what you see, council, is suburban commercial, and what you would have is an additional filling in of general residential in this area. And to the east are some other rectangular tracts that are still zoned agricultural use. I've been in some contact with those property owners. I suspect that they will transition at some time in the future. After review of this item, the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation to you, council, is for approval of the future land use map amendment. And again, it's for the rectangular piece highlighted in the darker yellow. And I'd like to entertain any questions you have for the first part of this
Any
request.
questions on Part A? Mr. Harris?
How many, I guess along that Clear Creek corridor, how many flume changes or rezoning requests have we had, say, like in the past? I mean, you may not remember, but just off the top of your head, if you can just, in the past 10 years, I guess.
Well, not many. That's a very good question. This, we call it the Southwest Flume Update. Back in late 2012, what the city council elected to do was take every property that was zoned R1, R1A, and R2, and automatically transition it down to general residential. When they did that, it mitigated the need and dealt away with the need to have so many future land use map amendments. Now, the purpose behind that, Mr. Harris, was that even though we had the land use designation, we didn't have the accompanying zoning to match it. So a lot of the properties were already zoned. We knew they weren't going to change the zoning, so the common sense thing that the council did was to amend it. We have a couple of properties. This is one that was still zone ag. Those people, two of them said, leave the property as it is. However, Atkinson Homes, of course, is a developer, a home builder. So we did that amendment in January of 2013. Mr. Atkinson has waited 5 years to see if the market would yield something that he could do suburban residential. He doesn't feel comfortable because we've got mobile homes to the west.
Right.
So he actually didn't feel comfortable putting single family there at all, which is the second part of the request. So in this particular case, it was proactive thinking on the council's part back in 2013, and it dealt away with the need to have all those future land use map amendments.
All right, thank you, sir.
All right. Moving on to the second part, PH 18-005B, hold a public hearing and consider an ordinance requested by Atkinson Homes, Inc., case number Z17-30, to rezone approximately 19.560 acres out of the T. Arnold Survey Abstract Number 55 from agricultural to R2 two-family residential district. The property is locally known as 7610 Clear Creek Road in Killeen, Texas. Mr. McElwain.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is your second part of this request, council. This is an unplatted property that is currently zoned as agricultural use. This is the zoning that we attached to the property after we annexed it. And that annexation became effective, I believe, early 2008. In our review of the case, we took note that a lot of the properties to the east and the north have transitioned to a denser residential character. This property abuts several other rectangular tracts that have yielded very little development at this point in time, but I can tell you that a number of those owners have come into the office to look at doing something with their properties now. Just to advance to the map, you'll see again the rectangular portion of the property. The green represents agricultural use. We've got R1 to the west, B4 to the west, R1 and R1A to the north, and then as you head east, we've got, again, these rectangular tracts, including one portion that was not annexed into the city. We notified 20 surrounding property owners. We received no official protest. Now, at the City Council, at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, rather, Ms. Laura Villegas, who resides at 7400 Clear Creek Road did speak in opposition. Her concerns are included in your minutes. Following the closing of the public hearing, the P&Z's recommendation to you is for approval of R2 zoning by a vote of 6-0. And I'd like to answer any questions you have on this zoning case.
Mr. Kilpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. McVeigh, I have a couple of questions, please. First and foremost is, of this 19.560 acres, we won't see the plat. So it's very critical. We understand as we're going to look at a specific, not just a general residential, they're asking for an R2. So I understand platting is going to come later, but that's one of the issues I continue to have is, and this is a primary case, it's in my district, as to density. How many duplexes are we going to put in to this 19.5 acres in a rectangular box, elongated, that does not have frontage access? Only access I can see to it is on a private drive.
Sure. We have been in discussions with Mr. Atkinson. He is in discussions with the property owner due west of him. Their intent, last we spoke, was to negotiate an agreement between themselves which would allow for a public road to connect from State Highway 201, head east and then south. And it's my understanding that Mr. Atkinson will go in and make the necessary improvements to the private drive so that we have 2 points of ingress, egress to the site. Now, that roadway has to be 60 feet right away. Now, you yourself mentioned that it's a rectangular piece that provides some type of limiting constraints in the shape of the property. What you'll typically get are duplexes, 7,000 square feet, 60 feet wide, at least 110 feet deep. It doesn't yield a lot of possibilities for the developer. You may, his engineers in attendance tonight, but there's not a lot that they can do. They'll try to get in as many duplexes as they can, but the fact is, the constraint is with the shape of the property and the right-of-way, easements and the like. You're not going to yield as many duplexes as you would with another shaped property, even though it's 20 acres. We're also intending to work with a larger developer to the east to see if we could further mitigate some of the transportation-related impacts. But that would rely on quite a bit of communication between all of those property owners on those rectangular tracts, because this is something that doesn't show in our thoroughfare plan, but we feel strongly that we need to have to further development in this area. So your concerns are warranted, but I could tell you just from the development constraints and the shape of the property, it's not going to be as dense as the developer would like, just because he doesn't have access to that much land at this point in time.
Thank you. That is my major concern, because you just gave me 3 different conditions. There's a condition to the property to the east, whether they can work out a deal to get in there. There's a condition onto the private road to the south, whether they can or cannot. And there's a condition to the west, which they're also going to be planning on developing their properties. And if we do the same thing, we have 3 sections here that are approximately the very same, two equal sizes of the case we're looking at today. If everyone decided they wanted to place the same density of houses and everything, at this time, I say I don't have enough information, and I'm not comfortable whatsoever with contingencies to say, well, we think we're going to work out a deal with this developer beside, or landowner beside us, and we think we're going to have this. I don't know how many egresses they're going to try to get as many as they're in there. So if we're talking about a 0.25 acres per one for duplex, I have a parking issue. I don't think there's going to be enough roadway within there. There's going to be a one-way in, one-way out with one little juttix to go out to somewhere. And I've also received calls from property owners that have the very same thing. And with a being that is right across from our entry point into this city. The gateway into our city is our airport. And this is going to be right across from it. We just don't need a whole bunch of conjecture of what can be, could not there until, and like I say, I still have that objection, Mr. Mayor, that we do not get to see the plat whatsoever until it's already done. And after that's done, we live with whatever we get. But I'm an objection to this at this time because of those contingencies. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mrs. Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question. I don't know how important it is, but to me, it's important. I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Kilpatrick, his concerns about these houses. My thing is there anything in the ordinance to say that when the contractors build these homes, adequate lighting, there should be something that says, you're going to build these homes, then you better put adequate lighting, because right now we're faced with not enough lighting within our neighborhoods right now. So when these contractors are doing this, they need to be accounted for. They need to be responsible for putting enough lighting now to continue on into the future of Killeen. And there should be something written before they can even build a house. So is there anything right now, Mr.?
There is, Ms. Fleming.
Okay,
In the
thank you.
subdivision regulations, we require street lights every 600 feet. That's not a magical number. The 600 feet is half of a block. A block length in Killeen is 1,200 feet. So what you have is basically, if every lot is 60 feet, you've got a street light every 10 houses. If you look at it in terms of 60-foot wide lots, and then 10 of those will give you 600 feet. Now, that is the standard. There is no additional standard, at least that the developer is responsible for. We are in the process of evaluating our subdivision regulations. I can tell you that, and we're meeting with the city manager tomorrow to discuss some of these things. But there is something in the code, and I've read and understand that it's inadequate for some individuals. I understand that, and that's something we're going to look at.
Yes, sir. I think this needs to be addressed right away, because if we don't work on this and keep hitting the hammer down on the contractors and developers, they're going to do what they want to do. They're going to set one street light as far as they want to. They don't want to be responsible for these lightings. That's what happened in the past.
And I think that's something that we can bring up later. I don't think it's part of
Well,
this.
it's part of housing, and I think Mr.
No, I
Kilpatrick was so
understand.
concerned. Okay, sir. But I think that should be addressed too. The lighting is
Yeah,
very important.
And that's a different ordinance that we can
Yes,
address.
thank you.
Mr. Johnson?
We have Pedro here, if he wanted to speak. He's the representative.
Council, I know this is not a public hearing, but unless we got a majority, we need a majority of council to say, okay. Do I see heads go up or down?
Yes.
Sir, is this concerning this right here, or is it something else he's?
I think he's the developer, right?
You're a developer?
Engineer. So are everybody okay? This is not a public hearing, but, all right. Short and quit.
Pedro Quintero, 415 East Avenue D. My goal is to stand up here and make you comfortable with this development. Please understand this area hasn't seen development in a long time. And the reason it hasn't seen it is because you don't have the infrastructure and utilities in this area. Understand this is a 20-acre tract approximately on the uppermost watershed where you don't have water and sewer utilities abutting this property. So a developer is not going to bring a plat before you until he secures his zoning. So much work, energy, and effort gets spent in doing a plat. And I can tell you this, so I want to make it comfortable. We got 20 acres. Our width is about 400 feet. We're going to be able to fit about 60 duplex lots. We're looking to gain access off of this private drive. We're negotiating with this RV park here to get a second street put in through there, through that curb cut along Clear Creek that allows you a right in, right out, left out. Now, we have talked to the people to the west. We are looking to extend utilities up to this property. We want to make this development work, but it starts with the zoning. If we can't get a second street ingress and egress, well, the code prohibits us from doing a development with 30-plus acre lots. So we can't meet our density if we can't do our access. Lighting, there is a great ordinance that we have in place that will take care of our lighting requirements. Please note, there's mobile home parks all along our east or west side. We feel that you go from a mobile home, commercial, duplex to single family is a great transition of land use, and this development will promote the utility and access infrastructure to see more development in the area. I'd like to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Kilpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With a master's degree in city planning, I fully understand the transitionary from one zone to another zone. I also understand that, and your numbers are coming out exactly better than what I have. There are 60 times 2, that's 120 households. Those 120 households times 2 cars per gives us approximately 240 cars within that 19 acres that are going to dump out onto either possibly a private road, possibly into a existing mobile home park that now has to get onto 201. And that is barely adequate coming out of there now with the transition from a 4-lane to a modified 5-lane back to a 4-lane in that area. Also with the traffic coming out of the airport and a neighborhood bar, not a restaurant, a bar. So you're going to dump 240 more cars out onto 201 because it can't go anywhere else. So I'm talking about the density of people, the density of cars, with still only in that rectangular shape, elongated one egress and ingress onto that major street. You'll have a dump point, but that one road is going to dead end at the end of your property to the north. You'll have to stub it out, because I don't think you're going to build a road continuing on into the north. So you haven't alleviated any of my concerns, sir.
Well, the RV park here, we're going to build a street and rezone and replat this and coordinate with them to do a street that ties into 201 to this development. So have a road here and a road here. A street, not through mobile. Mobile home is gone, being turned into something else.
It is
with the
currently
public
still
street.
an existing mobile home with still residents there. And I'm not going to argue the case with you. We won't see that plat. That is my major case. You're talking about things of conditions that will go into the plat. This body will never see that plat. So if you don't get that conditional road through that mobile park and it becomes economically infeasible for you to continue your project with that, then you're still going to have an R2 zone and try to develop as much as you can into it. I still, Mr. Mayor, I still voice my objections to it. Thank you.
Mrs. Nash King, your question is for?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to agree with Ms. Flume. It's not only the light, the infrastructure, and also the roadway. Mr. Kilpatrick, I'm concerned about quality of life. That seems to me so congested that if something was to happen, it's just going to be chaos. So even though you may have the adequate lighting, but the roadway and keeping the maintenance on that to make sure it's done correctly the first time. But I do understand his concern about 240 cars in and out. It just seems so small.
I'll speak towards that. Based on the traffic highway capacity manual, a single-family residential home produces 10 cars per day. A duplex, you can double that. You have 60 duplexes, that's 120, so 240. But understand the infrastructure and the streets and the dual access. These are local code requirements that address those concerns in dumping into arterial streets. So the infrastructure and our ordinances and rules and standards that we have in place are designed to handle that traffic flow. And these lots, it's a lower density, a 3 per acre lot, a smaller density than some of these higher density developments. That's going to have a lot more green space. So you'll have more green space, 2 ingress egress for 60 lots with, and we feel that it's addressing those concerns that y'all have. And please note, you have to get your zoning first. Otherwise, your development is just going to sit with zoning. You get your zoning, and once you can plan it to secure that second right away is when you move forward with your project. Otherwise, it's just going to stand. All these components have to come together to make the project work.
And if I may say, I think that this is something that the council, especially in that area, is going to have to deal with in the future. And the reason is because, not only is it by the airport, but it's also by the university. And in the university, I think that as that grows, you're going to see more and more of these projects where people look for, places for students to live, like duplexes and apartment complexes where you will see a high amount of traffic. So it's something that I think that, especially in that area, University District, I don't know, and this area that's close to the airport, I think that's what you will see more of. Mr. Rivera.
Mr. Mayor, I can see both sides of the house. First, I believe that what we need is not too far near the future, we need to sit down and go through the local code requirement that we have in our city. I got a feeling it's time to review them in order to prevent things like this. But I was there this afternoon before I came up to the meeting. And I could tell you, I have my doubts also. I just waited for everybody. And just about everyone have answered my question. I don't know if this is going to be a 66 feet road wide. When I look up there, it kind of concerned me also the amount of apartments going to probably be there. And hopefully, maybe we get some students in that area. Maybe we'll be capable to do that if those duplexes will attract those kind of marketing to that area. But also, my biggest concern is when I look at other places like this one was parking. Children are playing in that area on weekends. That's really concerns me. I have no idea if there's, and there's no doubt, zoning will always come first. We understand that as a whole. But that's what's kind of concern I had. Then the other concern you probably answered right away with 2 streets, one to the west and one to the south. Emergency vehicle. And in the type of road that we build there, we need to consider the emergency vehicle going through there. Not only POVs, but the emergency vehicle going through there day by day and whatever we take. So questions like those are really are the one that I'm concerned. Once I see that, I also see the type of marketing area that we're going to market there and what's going to be the purpose for. That place have not been developed for a long time for a reason. And I don't want to get into that because it has nothing to do with this. But we have to make sure that, and we understand where you're coming from, where you explain what are you going to do. But the idea is we need to see things like those, make sure in our mind. And that is why I went to that location, to make sure that because 5 years ago, I went to that location. 4 years ago, I went to that location. Now I went back in there to see what you're going to develop there. And I'm very concerned the amount of duplex going into that area, the amount of vehicles going to go to that area, how wide is going to be that street, and how the emergency vehicles are going to make it through there. Those are the things that I'm concerned about, and those issues. And it's just comments. You answer most of them, but the most important one is children in that neighborhood, in those duplex, there will be a lot of children, I believe so. And I don't know if they're going to be a little quality parking there where they could play, or they'd be restricted only to the street side, like I see quite a few duplexes here, because 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when they built duplex, there was nothing built for children. They all were in the street. There was no space for them. So that's what I'm concerned about, that area. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. All right. I think we heard enough. If not, Mr. Olson.
Oh, I think we have heard enough, but I have something to say anyway.
Go ahead.
I've heard the council on it. This has nothing to do with the zoning issue. I've heard a number of comments here about our development standards and requirements, lighting and other things. I heard Mr. Rivera just say that maybe it's time for us to go back and look at the entire development requirements. And I couldn't agree more. In fact, I've already asked the staff to begin looking at a unified development code that would take all of our development requirements and consolidate them under one code, which is pretty common in Texas now. And then that would require the council to come in and review all of that and re-adopt all of the development code under a unified format. So I think we're in harmony with what I'm hearing the council talk about, and just want to let you know that we're out about a half a step in front of the council, and we've already started working on that.
So that's something that the staff can do, or do we need council input as a committee or anything
I think what we'd end up doing is starting with basically taking the codes that we currently have and reformatting them under one unified code, so you don't have to go to multiple places. It would be one code. And then when we start reviewing that with the council, then we can start talking about additional things or amendments that the council would want to have. I think the staff has to start the process,
Yeah.
and then the council has to finish it.
Okay. Mr. Johnson.
I've been calling for a unified development code for a long time, like Timber has, so that makes me very happy. That would be great. Is there a way we can push some of that stuff down the Planning and Zoning Commission before it
I think
comes
that's
here?
good, because I think a lot of it should, they should be part of it.
Just, it's called
As
Planning
long,
and
and,
Zoning.
and I want to say this, because a lot of times we've done that in the past, and I think sometimes the planning and zoning feels that the council doesn't take their input serious. So we make them do the work, and then their recommendations are completely ignored or changed or anything like that. So I think that if we ask them to do something like that, let's give them that opportunity to really have that input, so.
Maybe we could start by having us put together a work plan that would come back, and you could approve the work plan itself that could include some estimates of how long it's going to take us and a process by which we'd run it past the Planning Commission and update the council. Let us outline a process for you.
All right, Mr. Okrie.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, in doing that, Mr. Olson, it might be a good idea to look at what the latest technology is as far as lighting is concerned, because you have the distance between them now with lighting improvement, with these halogen types of lightings. You can do other things with lighting. You can pump music through them. You can even put video on them. Those are some things that we need to look at also.
Oh, I agree.
And also, we did look at something as far as chapter 31, and it talks about with the structure, and looking at structures for a way of holding the value on was it property valuation. We looked at that before, and by the time it got to council, it was all watered down. So I don't know, we need to make sure that we don't stack the decks against us or against the city when we look at that.
All right. All right. That was good. I know we got off subject here. Apologize for that, but it's something that
Need to be done.
blame the city manager. He brought it up, so. But that was the last item, I think, on our public hearing. We're going to go back to our DS items, and DS 18-016, receive quarterly financial report. Mr. Locke, you're back up.
Thank you again, Mayor, City Council. This is an overview of the operational results of the general fund and the major enterprise operating funds for fiscal year 18, and we'll begin with the general fund. Just to start with a background of exactly what the graph is depicting. The green represents the revenues and the blue expenditures. The solid color is the actual activity and the striped color is the budget. You'll also notice that there are some dark, kind of a navy blue color dashes on each one of the bar graphs, and those are just budget progress indicators. At this point in the fiscal year, you would think that we'd be about 25% through the budget. So that just marks off where 25% would be for each revenue and expenditure. Beginning with the general fund revenues, the total revenues were $36.5 million, which represents 44% of the total budget of $82.3 million. This is an increase of about 7% compared to last fiscal year, or $2.3 million. Property tax and sales tax make up the majority of the general fund revenue. They actually comprise about 2/3 of the general fund revenue. And property tax collections are at 89% of what was budgeted for the fiscal year. Property tax collections become delinquent on February 1st, so the city receives the bulk of property tax during the first quarter of the fiscal year. Sales tax collections are at 23% of what was budgeted. Year-to-date collections are $5.4 million. On the expenditure side, the total expenditures for the first quarter were $18.8 million, and that is of the $82.3 million budget, which represents 23% of the budget. Comparing total expenditures to last fiscal year, expenditures are up $1.4 million. And then this can be explained by the transfer to the Governmental Capital Improvement Plan Fund. That is in conjunction with the tax rate being adopted above the rollback rate, and all the funds that the city collected above the rollback rate were moved into the Capital Improvement Project Fund to fund capital projects for the city. Moving on to the Water and Sewer Fund. Beginning with the revenues, the total revenues collected during the first quarter of Water and Sewer Fund were $9.3 million. This is 23% of the $40.9 million budget in the Water and Sewer Fund. The total revenues collected by Water and Sewer are down. And the reason that they are down is during the first quarter of last fiscal year is when the fleet funding program was terminated, was closed, and the remaining funds were returned to Water and Sewer and Solid Waste. So adjusted for that, Water and Sewer funds are up 1.5%, or about $140,000. There are a total of 1,300 more water accounts as of December 2017 than there were in December of 2016. Water and sewer sales both are right around $4.2 million and are both at 23% of what was budgeted for the fiscal year. On the expenditure side, total expenditures through the first quarter were $8 million. This is 19% of the $40.9 million budget. Comparing the total expenditures to last fiscal year, they are up $1.3 million. There's two primary reasons for that. One is the timing of the water option payment that the city makes to WCID. The payment was made during the first quarter of the fiscal year this year. That was close to $800,000. And the second being vehicles that were purchased for the water and sewer enterprise were about $500,000. The next fund is the solid waste fund. Total revenues in solid waste fund are $4.2 million through the first quarter, and we've collected 23% of the budget of $18.1 million. The total revenues in the solid waste fund are also down. This is a result of the closure of the fleet funding program. Last year, there was around $500,000 returned to the solid waste fund when that was closed. If adjusted for that, the revenues are still down about $90,000. And the reason for that is that it's the timing of the billing cycle. The last billing cycle fell in the month of December on a weekend, so it was actually posted in the month of January. So it's just an accounting of the last billing cycle. The water and sewer fund had volumetric usage that made up the difference. The solid waste and the drainage funds don't have the volumetric side, they just have the rate. So by the end of next quarter, we'll be caught up with the solid waste and the drainage. On the expenditure side with solid waste, the total expenditures through the first quarter were $3.9 million of the $17.4 million budget, which is 22% of the budget. Expenses are down significantly, about $800,000, and this is largely due to the, during the first quarter of last fiscal year is when the solid waste made the one-time transfer payment into the general fund, and that was a total of $1.6 million. So that's the reason for the.
Mr. Herrera.
Two things. We're talking about the revenue and expensive. The revenue is not accurate because accounting purposes. What about the expensive?
Yes, so the revenue is accurate in terms of.
It's not up to date.
Correct. It was just a timing of when a billing cycle ended. Since the billing cycle ended on the weekend, it was posted on the following Monday, which so happened to fall in January.
Those expenses also fall into that category?
No, sir. The expenses would be accounted for in the proper period. And for that matter, the revenues are accounted for in the proper period too. It just so happened the way that the billing cycle fell, that next quarter there'll be an extra billing cycle of revenue in it, which will make up for the billing cycle that was lost during this quarter.
Okay. Thank you.
The next fund that we'll discuss is the drainage fund. The total revenues collected in the first quarter are $1 million, which is 23% of the $4.2 million budget in the drainage fund. Just as with the solid waste fund, the drainage revenues are down 1%, which is $12,000. Again, I expect that to be back on track by the end of next quarter. That additional billing cycle that'll be in next quarter will bring us back up to date with the drainage revenue as well. The commercial fees are at $140,000 on the year. We've collected 22% of the budget, and residential fees are at $827,000 on the year. We've collected 23% of the budget. On the expenditure side, total expenditures are $918,000, which represents 17% of the total budget. This is an increase of about $250,000 compared to last fiscal year, and this is related to some major drainage projects that we have in the drainage fund right now. There was a budgeted $320,000 transfer from the drainage fund to the drainage capital fund to cover the projects such as the Liberty Ditch, the Nolan Creek, and the Patriotic Ditch projects. The final fund that we'll discuss this evening is the Aviation Fund. Total revenues in the Aviation Fund through the first quarter were $845,000. We've collected 29% of the total budget in aviation of $3 million. This is a decrease when you compare it to total revenues last fiscal year at the same time. This is due to a grant project that was being funded in aviation at the time. Adjusted for that, the aviation revenues are up 4%, or about $33,000. Just looking at the Killeen Fort Hood Regional Airport operational revenues, they're at $725,000 through the first quarter, and we've collected 29% of what was budgeted for operational revenues. On the Skylark operational revenues are at $96,000, and we've collected 24% of what we budgeted for Skylark operational revenues. On the expense side, the total expenses through the first quarter were $646,000, which is 18% of the budget. This is a decrease of about $245,000, and again, that was the grant-funded project that the aviation had during the first quarter of last fiscal year for the difference. So that's all the information that I wanted to share with you this evening. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Locke? Mr. Kilpatrick?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Understanding this is about a 24,000 feet look down for that first quarter, which is what it is the opinion of this council person. That's what this council should be looking at, and we're right there. I would like to commend the city manager and the staff. I noticed for probably the first time since I've been on here that we've got a quarterly report. No expenditures have exceeded revenues in any one of our funds for this quarter. They're generally probably within 10 to 15% right on line. That to me is indicative of a ship that has been turned into proper direction with good planes left out, so it's steady running. I appreciate this type of look-see. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, we got a good financial guy out, right? Mr. Oakrey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I like them colors still, Mr. Locke. They're not angry. Like
No red.
Yeah.
All right. Mr. Rivera, did you raise your hand?
No, sir.
Oh, anybody else? All right. All right, I think you're done. We got a couple of more items, but I think you guys are indicating you want a break, right? So we're going to take about a 10-minute break before we continue on. So.
Okay.
All right, next item is our DS 18-017, discuss large truck parking adjacent to residential property. Chief Kimball, welcome. You look sharp in uniform.
Sir, yes, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council, Mr. Olson, Ms. Smith, I guess should be, Ms. Davis, you're on our way.
Really?
You want me to wait, or you want to get? How you doing, Ms. Davis?
We're all here.
Tonight is a discussion on large truck parking in residential areas, looking for some guidance from the council on this issue. Truck parking, section 28-132 of the code, parking in residential areas addresses truck and trailer parking in areas, including the areas adjacent to zone residential areas. City staff, we reviewed options defining the restrictions of parking trucks over 1 ton to 200, 300, 500, and 1,000 feet within a zoned residential area. There are some concerns. Currently, trucks are parking, they are parking within the zoned 100-foot buffer. And if you kind of look at this picture here, you can see there's some issues because if people drive through there, they have to drive left of the roadway into oncoming traffic. Children play. You might not actually see the children. They run out into the street. So there's some driving safety. There's some noise abatement issues also. Those trucks, if they have refrigeration units, if they run all night, if they're within that buffer area, there have been complaints of residents can hear the refrigeration units. What we have here, the area in red illustrates a 200-foot buffer around all residential zonings. That's 200 feet, that slide. This slide represents a 300-foot buffer around all residential zonings. This slide here, area in red represents a 500-foot buffer around all residential zonings. As you can see, the restrictions of parking in the city gets more and more restrictive. And then we looked at a 1,000-foot buffer around all residential zonings, basically, in most part, would be eliminating truck parking in the city of Killeen. So as a discussion item, before we move forward, we wanted to get the will of the council before we move on with this effort and see which direction you want to proceed, sir.
Mr. Okray.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief Kimball, about a few years ago, I talked with a resident who is a truck driver.
Yes, sir.
And this exit, the one that's right, the exit that the very first exit, where you, when you come off Fort Hood, you stayed in that neighborhood area.
Willow Springs.
Willow Springs area. And the gentleman had inquired with me about parking his bobtail in the area in his parking space, but because in the residential area, but on his property. My question is, in consideration of these buffer areas, and I don't know, Mr. Olson, if we've looked into this with some of these areas, if the city has a piece of property that could maybe be used, because these people come in off the road, they may be here for a couple of days and they back out on the road. They paying taxes, and they buying homes, and their families are staying here and everything. Is it possible? Is it something that, is it a feasibility of the city maybe providing an area where they can either park, the truck and the trailer, or, a place where somebody can come pick them up and take them home and then bring them back? Is there a feasibility to accommodate our residents that are, that's over the road driving?
Yes, it is possible to accommodate them, and we're presently looking for an appropriately zoned piece of property where that could happen. Ideally, it would be best to have somebody from the private sector create a parking lot and do it. I don't think that's going to happen until parking gets more restrictive, because they're finding places to park now. Yeah, we're in the process of looking at city-owned properties that would be appropriately zoned to be able to accommodate that.
And also, a second part to this is with the roads, as far as a zone, like downtown area, is it a way to zone particular roads to use, like from 190, a truck route, so to speak? Aside from the trucks running in and up and down these roads and degrading them because of the weight. Is that something that we looked at also?
Yeah, we have to do a traffic study, but of course, the state highways, 190 and 201, they would qualify. We just have to see what streets are rated to handle the weight that those trucks would bring on to, to the core downtown, for example. Just those streets just might not be rated to handle all that weight on a consistent basis.
Right, because they're riding on the roads now with them, either probably, I don't know what the rating is, but if they're doing that, ruts in the road, they are occurring while we're speaking.
No. I think most of the streets are able to handle on a temporary basis, loading and unloading, but when you start doing 100 trucks a day and, around corners and shrubberies and thin curbs, and you start tearing things up.
Thank you.
Mrs. Nash King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Mr. Okray. with finding the location for the truckers. But my only concern is the city not being liable if someone break into the vehicle, if something would happen, that we have some kind of stipulations put in place if it's city property that those vehicles will be on overnight, that they sign a waiver or something that we're not held accountable if someone would break in or do damage to their vehicles.
I think if the city went that route, we could take care of that through postings, signs, 12 by 12 signs, 3-inch lettering words, and make sure it's conspicuously posted through ordinance that we just won't be held liable for, you park at your own risk, basically.
Correct.
So,
Thank you, Chief.
Yes,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And on this, even if you put, like right now, it's what, 300? Is it 300 feet from currently?
I believe it's 100, I believe.
Or 100? So even at 100, I think you're still limited as to where you can park. There's only certain areas because obviously you can't park in the middle of the road and you can't park on private property. So what they do is they find certain areas where, they're not going to be told to move it even though they can't park there. And so I'm one for that. You try to make it as restrictive as possible and find a location where they can do it if we have it, even if it's a dirt road somewhere. But I think that 100 feet, I know that, I'm not sure if that's where your pictures are, but the one that's on Clear Creek, over there on Clear Creek where they park, and I've had a lot of residents in that area, and I can tell you they're probably more than half a mile down the road from where they live, and they can still hear those trucks come in all the time. And I'm not trying to put trucks drivers down because I think that a lot of people here, that's where they make the living once they leave the military. We just have to find a way to create some kind of zoning somewhere, maybe on our ATJ somewhere where they can actually go, but not inside the city, and in restrictions and designated only for trucking out there. So I think that's kind of the direction the chief is looking for, something like that from the council. Mr. Harris?
Because I was going to say, I remember we had this discussion a little bit of time ago about the trucks as well, and you brought up the private sector, establishing a truck parking area as well. And but I'll just say, I sympathize with the truck drivers as they did right there. And let's see, I agree that some research can be done to see if we can accommodate them somewhere somehow. Because like I said, we don't want them at the park, far away, and then families have to come in. But do any other cities around us, in our immediate area, vicinity, have any truck parking areas or anything like that that you know of?
I don't know.
Okay.
I believe Temple is the only, just right off the top of my head, just right the interstate.
Right.
I think the truck stop that I seen, that was commercials up near.
Yeah, they
Temple.
put them at truck stops, and it's usually hotels. Like there's one off of there off 35 and 190, and it's a hotel, but it's a truck stop.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about truck parking. I don't know if somebody wants to do a truck stop.
Well, they
that's
park
fine.
there.
But I know they do. But are we just talking about just a parking area or a truck stop type area?
Overnight parking.
Parking, yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yes.
Mrs. Fleming?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Chief, across from St. Joseph's on Rancier, that empty lot where the Walmart was to be, there's a lot of 18-wheelers parked over there. Because when I had my signs up, a lot of them go over there and park their trucks. And I think, the owner, I think, is not even there. So a lot of the 18-wheelers, they park there, nobody bothers them, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, the greater discussion is, are they in violation of the ordinance? It may be in violation, but there's nobody there to enforce
Right,
it.
nobody's going to enforce it because they're not even here. So I don't think anybody over there cares if they park over there. They're not bothering anybody. There's plenty of room over there, so I don't know how you could check that out to see if that would be a feasible place right now until they start putting something there, but that would be an ideal place.
That's a private place, though.
I know, but whoever owns it, I'm saying, somebody could check it out and give them permission, because you got to have somewhere for these truckers to go without getting a ticket.
Mr. Kilpatrick?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree. The biggest selling point that Mr. Oakley makes is they're citizens. They have their employment takes them away with their means of transportation to do that. While they're here temporarily, they're still, their families are still The only caution that I would offer if we're going to put a 5-acre plat of land and put signs up and say, overnight parking, that we're going to have some other look-see that we don't get motorhomes, boats, large oversized vehicles, that they determine, their citizens, and they can't park it by their house, so they'll then again use that oversized parking area now to park their motorhome instead of putting it into a commercial storage element. And then what Ms. Nash King has raised up, then we very well may get into liability issues of damages, accidents, break-ins, things of that nature, as it becomes a city-owned and non-secured parking lot for one good effort may lead us into some other second, third, and fourth order effects issues. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So I think the question here is, put that aside, that the city's not going to get into truck parking business, and just come to this, do we move it from 100, 300, 500, 1,000 feet? So I think that's the question. Mr. Rivera.
Mr. Mayor, is there any way possible that we could send this issue to the Transportation Committee? So the Transportation Committee look into this and work with this and bring back a recommendation?
You got to remind me, who was the Transportation Committee?
Mr. Oak Creed, Mr. Kilpatrick, and myself.
I think this is a simple thing, we just got to stop and just say, hey, let's make a decision here, let's go 1,000, 100, 1,500.
I agree 100% that we should have a location for it, but then you're talking about expensive, about, those 18-wheeler create a lot of damage to those roads.
That's why I say throw that part out, and let's just decide, do we want 100, what was the recommendation?
I think 100 is the most restrictive.
Right now, it's 100, and so do we want to make it more restrictive? Because right now, the challenge is with the 100, we still see trucks parked on Clear Creek and different areas within the neighborhood. And in order to alleviate some of that, do we expand that a little bit? I think that's the number one thing, right? Ms. Davis?
Sorry, I just need to clarify. Right now, there is no foot restriction. Right now, it says they can't park adjacent to property that's
That's right.
zoned residential. And the problem with Clear Creek, which is the pictures that you were looking at, is there's a narrow strip of land that's zoned commercial that backs up to the backs of the residential property, and that's why the trucks are legally allowed to park there, because they are adjacent to commercially zoned property, not residentially zoned property.
And you could correct me, but that was done in 2007 or 2008 when it was put out. But the city have grown so fast that those places, they now have become rooftops.
And that's why we're looking at this, and that's why this recommendation is to put something in place with that distance there. Mr. Okry?
And I agree with that, because you're looking, I'm thinking even more restrictive, given even how our homes and our neighborhoods are being constructed. You hear all kind of stuff next door. But I think telling people, making it restrictive, not giving nobody or people an alternative.
Yeah.
I mean, now they're making a livelihood. I really believe they need to have an alternative, a safe, a legal alternative place. Now we talk about temporarily, off the top of my head, at the special event center. That's a pretty big parking area, but then it's adjacent. I don't know how that may be more than 100 feet away. So what you have to get, I believe in doing this, we need to have somewhere an alternative for someone to put it. If you make it more restrictive than it is already, which I agree with, what's the alternative?
And I think that's one of the things when you put pressure, especially on these companies, because a lot of them come here, Fort Hood, to hire a lot of these drivers, and they can get a lot of them from here. But I think we haven't put enough restrictions to make them say, you know what, a lot of our drivers live in the clean area, and they have this new code that you can't park the truck here. Maybe we need to figure out a way to accommodate them, because that's what they do in certain areas. If you go down 35, you know, they built those rest areas because all these truck drivers were parking on the side of the road. And then they realized that, and what did they do? They took action, and I think that putting that pressure back on the private companies to come up with a solution versus taking that burden onto us. Because right now, what's happening, if you drive by at Clear Creek, that's a brand-new road. That's a street. And so they're putting that pressure on. In a few years, we're going to have to do the maintenance on that street for all these trucks that are just sitting there and parking and all that. So that's the other aspect of it. So I think for now, I would like, you know, just to see whether you guys want to make it more restrictive with the 1,000 feet, and then just put that back on the private enterprise. So they say that, you know, because the truck drivers, I'm sure, are going to complain, but what they need to complain is back to Schneider and all these other companies and say, you know what, we have so many drivers that live here, let's build something where we can park these Schneiders, especially if we do pass this ordinance and create some kind of fine if they do park in there, and I'm sure that's something we can do, and where they can find these companies. So, Mr. Johnson?
But now I'm on the fence because I haven't heard from truck drivers. We haven't heard from any of these transportation companies.
Well, I can tell you, I could act like a truck driver and say, no, I want a place to park my truck.
Again, it's important to hear from them before we make decisions that's going to affect them directly. I don't have a truck. I'm not a truck driver, but I would like to hear from them. I think it's important that anytime we bring something before this governing body, seek out the stakeholders, talk to the folks that are going to be most affected by it, and get their input, and that way the council know how they feel about this.
All right. Anybody else? Mr. O'Gree.
I favor a more restrictive deal. I mean, we waiting. Okay, it's almost like you die. You're gonna be there, you know, when you die. So you're gonna have to do it anyway. You should go ahead and do it, and that would probably generate the response.
So, Chief, are you looking for like a consensus from the council, a direction on?
I was just looking for the will of the council, and then we know how to
It sounds
proceed.
like, you know, I think the majority are looking for more restrictive, right? Do we make a recommendation as to, because he presented, how many, was it 3 different options? Or?
Yes, sir.
So out of those 3 different options?
4, I believe, I'm sorry.
4?
2.
Most restrictive?
2, 3, 5, and 1,000.
1,000 is the most restrictive, the least is the 1,000, which is more than we have now. So which way you guys, in between 500? 500. Mrs. Fleming, 500, 500?
We say, what will be considered, I mean, what's the study on decibel? You know, for loud or
Noise.
You know, something that would, what is it now? I mean, for you to get a ticket for loud music, what is the decibels?
I don't, but Ms. Davis, you might have to help me. I don't think there is a decibel listing. I just think it talks about the,
Reasonable person standard.
yeah.
There is a decibel level in there, but honestly, it's been so long since I've looked at that ordinance. And we don't really enforce it that way. So, I mean, really, we use the reasonable person standard.
All right, so I got 500. Mr. Rivera?
Chief, may I ask you a question here real quick?
Yes, sir.
With your knowledge, your background, your experience, all this good deal, what do you recommend? I mean, you people out there dealing with this issue. We are here just pretending that we know what we're doing, and I want to know what you people are doing.
You put, you know, the police, we're mainly involved in the enforcement end of it. So we enforce what the rule is. But we know we get all the complaints from the truck drivers. Truck driver come in, he'll see a police officer on the side of the road. Hey, where am I supposed to park my truck? Police officer, I don't know. And he'll find somewhere until a complaint comes. So we want to we want to find out, we kind of want to do what's reasonable. And I think finding an area in town where it's either accepted or within ordinance is the best thing to do.
And Mr. Mayor, I agree that we need to do something knowing to about, and I could live with 500, but we also got to make sure we understand what Mr. Oakley said. I don't want to feel like I'm penalizing these people just because they truck driving, they're making a living. We need to find an alternative where these people also could park. I mean, we don't want to shoot all this on top of them, and from one day to another, they just can't park in the city.
Hey, our airport needs parking, you know, we
I know
lost
it's both.
revenue because of the airport, so
There's
let's
no-
put them
there's
in the
no doubt.
airport.
That's what I'm saying, but come on, let's be realistic, that those citizens also, they're doing a living driving those vehicles. That's what I'm saying. But I do agree that we need to start somewhere.
I think I counted at least 4 of the 500, so I think we got Mr. Harris.
I'll say, I can agree to the 500, but my thing would be, while that's being worked out, even like Councilman Johnson said, let's go ahead and, while that process is being worked out, bring in the stakeholders, which are truck drivers or even, company reps or whatever, and let's talk to them and see, let's get some input from them if this is being worked out, because we may get some information or some insight about something to where we can actually work something out that's maybe better. So,
Yeah.
but 500 feet in general, I think is fine, pending talks with the stakeholders as well.
Okay, so we're going to go with the 500, Chief?
So, sir, you'd like me to move forward with an ordinance with 500 foot
500
buffer?
restriction, and maybe, once we do it, we'll have a public hearing on it or something, and
You can do that.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
I think you could have a public hearing. I also think that you could have multiple readings of the ordinance so
Yeah.
that it gives people plenty of opportunity to come in.
Yeah. Now, on top of that, is there anything we need to do as far as when we pass the law, like if they do park within it, what are the penalties?
Is there a penalty in the ordinance now?
The ordinance has standard penalties in our ordinance, but if you want to have a specific penalty, you can do that. You can set a maximum fine or a minimum fine, or you can just let it be within the range and let the judge set the fine, or the jury if they take it to court. It's up to you.
Yeah, I think there should be like a set. They know what it is, so it's easy.
Yeah.
I said first time, give them a break. Give them people a break first in the beginning.
All right,
Do that. You can require an initial one.
we'll just go for that, and I'm sure that once they get it back, at least that we'll have more discussion on it, so we'll discuss it more in detail, so.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chief. All right, moving on. City manager updates, council chamber renovations, Mr. Olson.
All right, thanks. During the discussion we had on the budget for adoption, we talked about a project that was ultimately included in the current budget, and that is the renovation and upgrading of our current city council chambers. So this report is an update on the status of that project. City council chambers were designed and constructed in 1994 and 1995. There have been no upgrades to the furnishings since that time. Video production was actually added to the city council chambers in 2008. And as you know, that's 10 years, and 10 years is a long time for technology to last in today's world. There was a structural assessment done on City Hall in 2016. That assessment assured us that the structural integrity of the building was in place if it had certain weight limitations attached to it. And we have adjusted the occupancy of the building in a way that we meet the structural requirements of the building. Over the course of time, we have actually explored multiple alternatives for the location of council chambers, and the determination has been that the City Hall is the most conducive and the most economical for upgrading a city council chamber. Staff engaged the use of a contracted architect to help us walk through what would be necessary for the upgrade. And we did adopt a budget, as I said. We have $496,000 in the current budget for this project, of which $300,000 is coming from cable TV franchise money. It is restricted and can only be used for this kind of a project. And we call that cable money, we call it PEG money, P-E-G, Public Education and Government Channel. That's where the money comes, that's where that $300,000 comes from. The other $196,000 comes from our Capital Projects Fund. So the money is there. Let's go to the scope. So what we've been working on is a complete reconstruction of the dais area where the city council is seated and the area immediately in front of that. We are looking at a complete rebuild of the electrical systems and the HVAC systems for that room. We'd be putting in new sound, new lighting, and new video capacity. And a complete update on all of the technology that supports the council meetings. There will be some cosmetic improvements. New carpet would be included, new upholstery to the existing chairs, paint and shades and new shades for the windows. Our intent in doing all of this is to have a better appearing, more functional place to have public meetings. It would have a more professional appearance, and from my point of view, most importantly, it would have new technology that would allow us to increase our transparency by better video streaming and rebroadcasting city council meetings. It would give us the ability to do both business meetings and work sessions. And to the extent we may have a desire to do so, any other public meeting could be broadcast from that area, including board and commission meetings. And any kind of an informal meeting would be accommodated there as well. We'd get higher quality recordings, and it would also lay the foundation for future video productions that we could use to educate ourselves through training and our citizenry on what was happening in the city. So this next slide is a architect's rendering of what that room would look like if you were standing in the back of the room and looking forward to the dais. You will notice there that the ceiling will be raised from its current level to something higher, allowing not only a good appearance, but I often tease my staff when you're sitting back there at that dais and you have all of those lights shining on you, and it becomes a very uncomfortable place. You feel like a basted turkey by the time you're done with a meeting. It would include, as I said, rebuilding the entire rostrum, and we'd leave the same chairs in the same configuration, but they would be reupholstered and repainted. There'd be new acoustics. All of the brown parts that you see there would be redone in an acoustically acceptable manner, so that the sound for both the recordings and for the meetings would work out much better than it does today. So that's an update on the project as we move forward. Let's see if let's go to the next steps. So there are two general next steps that would take place. The next thing for us to do is to prepare the bid, to put this out for an actual bid. And once received, then the staff would evaluate those bids and bring it back to the city council for an award for the construction contract. We anticipate that that entire process will take about 6 months to complete. So, if there are any questions, I'd be
Mr.
happy to
Johnson.
address them.
There are still plans for a room that city council members can use to meet with citizens.
I'm sorry,
Correct?
say,
A room, there was a room that I requested that we meet with citizens. Right now, I'm spending $200 per month on coffee, and it's just unprofessional as a member of the governing body that when a citizen asks me where my office is, it's at a coffee shop. So if you can find a room, I would definitely appreciate it.
let me
Any
give you
room.
let me give you an update on that. Just this past week, we went through, on the third floor of the City Hall building, we went through and put new carpets in part of that space, including, if you all remember where my office used to be before I moved into Ann Ferris's office. So we've taken that suite of 3 offices and put new carpets in there. And next week, we'll be ordering some new fundamental furniture, and our intent is that that will become the city council suite. So there'll be 2 offices there, one for the mayor, one for council members to use on a rotating basis, or however you want to do that, and a small conference room where you can have meetings as well. So within a few weeks, I would think that that space will be available for you.
Perfect. Very much appreciated.
And we've had a meeting space. I mean, I know at times we used the one down there right across from the city hall chambers there. And it's at Hillary's office right there. They got a table in there, so I've used that one a couple of times. So we've always had a room there, so.
I do think that the space that we're currently working on will accommodate what the council needs. We're going to have telephones in there, and we'll have computer access for you as well. And I think it'll meet your needs. It's not going to be fancy, but it'll meet your needs.
All right. Are we, any of the seats in the front, is it going to still have the same amount of seats, or are we losing any seats?
You will not be losing any of the audience seats, but the rostrum will be reconfigured so that we'll be able to do all of our business there, and we're going to be able to put a work session table out front if we want to do it that way. We'll have new monitors, large enough to see. The little monitors that are in there now are very difficult to actually see anything, so we're going to put in some of the biggest ones we can find, something short of the not being quite like the Cowboy Stadium, but big enough to see.
And we're looking to do our workshop meetings in there too, right? So it's workshop and
all of our
council meeting.
meetings will take place there, and we'll have a camera in the ceiling so that a person like Planning Commission, or if we had a meeting, we could lay out a map or a paper or a blueprint and actually see it and broadcast it. We'll have what they call a wolf vision. So at the rostrum, we'll have the capacity to have an electronic overhead projector so that if somebody comes in and they answering a question of the council and they have a sheet of paper, they could lay that paper on the wolf vision, and it would both broadcast and it would come across on your individual devices so you could actually see it, and it would broadcast on the TV monitors. So we're going to do our best to give, you know, you're only going to upgrade your technology every 10 years or so. We want to get as modern as we can to be able to communicate as best we can, both with the council and with the public.
All right, very good. Any other questions? Mr. Herrera?
No, I just wait till he gets done.
I'm done.
That was it?
I noticed in your last slide, the rear behind the flag and the wall, where that little kitchen is that's also going to be renovated for in the same? Because I see you got it right there, but I don't know if it's going to be part of it or not.
It will not be part of the renovation, but it will be accessible to the council.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Moving on. DS 18-019, a planning session. Review and discuss policy governing capital improvement project. Mr. Olson, welcome back.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. And if you'll recall, 2 weeks ago, we handed out a capital projects policy. What we're going to do tonight is run back through the highlights. And what I'd like to ask is that as we go through this section by section, when we get to a section, if there's a place where you have questions or somewhere you would like to offer some additional input, please stop me so that we can discuss that at that time. And hopefully by the time we're done, we'll have a set of comments that we can incorporate into a final draft for your approval. So if you'll recall, capital projects policies are going to set forth the framework for planning, development, funding, and construction of capital projects within the city of Killeen. Our intent here is to help the city council and the city staff maintain a long-term commitment to these capital projects. Again, section 1 is just a covering of our table of contents. As you move into section 2, that goes into our introduction. This provides a general policy statement, and it establishes that we will review this policy on an annual basis to see if there are any additions or deletions that need to occur at that time.
Mr. Mayor, thank you.
You got it. I got to go.
Who will do that annual review? You said we will do an annual review. Is that the staff, the city manager, the council?
The intent there is that city council would have an annual review of this policy. City staff would review the policy, and we would bring any recommendations we have and give you the same opportunity to review it at that time.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
Is there a way that the new council, each time they come on, we can review all the policies all at once? I know we haven't got the protocol yet, but instead of us doing it all throughout the year, I think it'd be good so that way the new council knows that this month we're going to do all of them all back to back.
As we've adopted several new policies or are in the process of adopting new policies, we're putting review dates in there. And I'm not sure that all of them are going to need to be reviewed annually. So far, the ones that we've been working on need annual review. And so in the policy itself, it's generally telling us what month we need to have the review. When we get to the protocol, you'll see that we're saying after the election each year that we'll go through the protocol. In the financial policy, we're going to do that by the end of January each year. So part of what I'm doing in my office now is going through an annual calendar of council agenda, recurring council agenda items, so that we can start anticipating when those things are going to be coming up for review and accommodate these various reviews. Now, I will tell you as we move forward, you're not going to be able to review every policy every single year. But the important ones, you probably should, so.
All right, moving to section 3. This is the section that discusses the capital improvements program. So the capital improvements program is the 5-year plan that we would be adopting annually, and that plan discusses all capital improvements that are intended inside of that next 5-year cycle, as well as establishes a long-range unfunded list of capital projects that we will continue to work towards. This section defines the process for development of that plan, and it includes things such as project prioritization, specific information that shall be contained within that CIP plan. And again, it establishes that the council will have an opportunity to offer their priorities for the capital improvements program over the next year at some course prior to adoption. Moving to section 4, this is general project requirements. The first and foremost here, we have a requirement that all projects would have a qualified project manager. Second piece here establishes a city manager committee. This is the capital projects review committee that the city manager will establish to prepare and review the CIP plan annually. And it does reaffirm that all projects are to be designed to local, state, and federal laws and regulations. Next section, Section 5, comes in is the non-discrimination in capital projects. We refer to this as the Title VI requirements. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 establishes non-discrimination practices within external contractors and vendors. In our case, this relates particularly to federally funded projects. However, we do practice this across the board with all of our projects. It lays out guidelines for an external vendor or an external contractor to file a complaint or make notice of any violation they feel of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The city manager is, or his designee, is responsible for the implementation of the Title VI plan, and we do currently have an adopted plan. What's covered in our policy is just that we will have the plan. So that comes to the end of our policy. Is there any particular area someone had comments that
Any
they would like to see
questions for
revisions?
Mr. Olson? Mr. Kilpatrick?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On Section 3, Capital Improvement Program, Section A, the capital projects plan shall identify available resources for project funding along with potential impacts of future operating budgets. I would open it up the discussion to be, would we make a statement immediately after that defines that it is the policy of the city to pursue all available federal and state funding resources, grants, et cetera, to the maximum extent possible as it has the potential impact on future budgets. And the reason why I say that is to there's been many discussions as we go about getting staff comments about a different grant or different this, and whether they're good or bad or grants or should we do this. I believe that we should make an affirmative statement to the public that it is the policy of this city that we will pursue getting federal, state grants to assist us in our fundings, but also with the intent that grants are free only for the period of time that they're given. Then we have to pick up the budget for them. But don't let that be a discriminating factor for us not to pursue a grant until we know how it impacts the operating budget.
So in your case, the authority would lay on the council, so you're suggesting that the staff pursue all the grants, and whether they see it feasible or not? Because sometimes, they may, just an example, say, this grant is going to cost the city 50%, and it may not be worthwhile, but it doesn't matter, we'll just bring it forward and apply for it no matter what.
Well, not apply for it, we would then make that determination, Mr. Mayor, if it is going to adversely impact our operating budget in the out years. For instance, a safer grant. Do we have the money in the 2022, 23, 24 budget or means to pay for that? But the policy should be, we should never just arbitrarily say, well, we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
The grants are going to cost us money. It would be an affirmative that the city council wants the staff to pursue the opportunity to apply for grants, not that we will apply for all, but that opportunity should be there.
Okay. Mr. Olson?
Perhaps the policy that you're suggesting could be qualified by saying that we would pursue the grants that would fit within our budget capacity and our long-term goals and something like that. So that, there are grants out there that create an additional obligation that actually runs contrary to our mission and to our financial capacity. So we really want grants, but we want to make sure that they fit within our, the right words are escaping me, but within our capacity and our mission.
Mr. Mayor, I agree with that. It's just an affirmative that we, within our culture, within our business practices, within our ability to accept those in a manner,
our
that we
budget.
should pursue. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mrs. Nash King.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Olson, there are some grants, like, for instance, the police department, where they receive grants and there's no obligation from the city. And I want them to continue to receive those grants, and they can find within their budget, I'm just saying police department, to utilize that, like for the protective vest. So I don't want to limit them on the grants they receive, that we are not obligated to pay back any money toward it. Okay, all right.
All right. Anybody else? Mr. Johnson? Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Fleming.
Thank you. Thank you.
I didn't see you. Women first.
It's okay. Anybody can make a mistake. You're human. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have one question pertaining to the project management. It says here that a committee will be organized by the city manager, and I'm asking who is going to be on that committee?
I don't know the answer to that question yet. And it may depend on what the projects are. I mean, there are, I would expect that there are probably a whole bunch of individualized characteristics that might change from time to time. So what this would do is give me the ability to analyze the projects and the requirements and appoint people that would fit those requirements.
Sir, when you say people, you mean within the staff or outside people,
I think
citizens that may
I
want to
think-
be?
Well, no, the anticipation here is that this would be a staff review.
Staff, okay.
Yeah.
Just wondering, when you say committee, I always like to know
Yeah.
who's going to be on what, where, and when, and why. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Johnson?
I have no comment. She stole my time to talk and my question.
I read your mind, huh?
I'm good.
Okay.
She had
Good
the
man,
question.
think alike.
All right, anybody else? All right, thank you, Mr. Olson. Moving on, review and discuss city council protocol, governance standards and expectations. Mrs. Davis,
Mayor,
you're up.
let me make a couple of introductory comments on this one while Mrs. Davis takes her place at the podium. This issue was actually introduced to the city council about, I'm going to say 2 months ago, maybe a little bit more than that, and I had asked for an ad hoc committee be appointed to review it, which it was. And the ad hoc committee has had a chance to go through and review it, make comments. The intent of this policy is to gather into one place the policies that we used to call our protocol. It's really been expanded beyond that. In fact, we've even suggested that we rename it to governing standards and expectations, because it's actually much bigger than the protocol ordinance that we used to have. The protocol ordinance basically deals with how we manage our meetings, and this gets bigger than that. So Ms. Davis has been kind enough to do most of the legwork on this. This is not her work. This is a combination of staff work, and it now includes comments from council. The important point I want to make here is that this is the city council's policy. And while we have given you a start on that policy, I don't want you to interpret that as a staff policy. It is the council's policy. So you need to amend it in whatever ways you think are necessary so that it can become your rules and your way of governing the city. And that's a very important point that I just want to emphasize before you begin the discussion.
All right. And I think also, I think we got a copy of it maybe two weeks ago, so hopefully everybody had ample time to look at it so we can discuss it here. So with that, Mrs. Davis?
All right. Thank you, Mayor. So as the city manager said, what we wanted to create is a single source reference that contains all of the council's rules, protocols, procedures, policies, and expectations, and gathers them all in one place. So council could easily reference it, so staff could easily reference it, and the public could easily reference it. And what we hope is that it will establish city council's expectations for itself, for committee members, for the staff, and for the public. That's why it is so important to remember what Mr. Olson said. These are your rules for yourself, for staff, for the public, and anyone who interacts with you. And so it's really important that y'all take the time to make sure that these rules are what you want them to be. And this draft document that we've presented to you is just a starting point for your conversation. And I forgot to point this out when I handed this out two weeks ago. Sorry, there is some repetition between the divisions, and some of you have noticed that. And the reason why is that some rules or policies or procedures fit in multiple divisions because this is a much more comprehensive document than what we've had before. And we wanted people to be able to find it where they may be looking for it. So the rule is the same, but you may find it under Division 1, and then you may find it under Division 3. So the repetition is intended, but just know when you're reading along, something may sound familiar, and that's the reason why. When we first started looking at examples to go by last fall when we undertook this project, what I came to realize is that most cities in Texas had virtually the same protocol document that we did. So I'm not sure where it came from. I'm thinking it was probably a draft document from Texas Municipal League or something like that. And most cities still operate from something very similar. So it was difficult to try to find comprehensive versions from other cities, but we did find a few that cities had represented to us had worked well for them. And so the cities that we used for a lot of the go-bys were Garland, Texas, Kennedale, Keller, Texas, Silverton, Colorado, and Boston, Massachusetts. You know that the committee did review this document. They had two separate meetings, and that was reviewed on December 19th and January 22nd, and the committee comments are noted in the draft. And when the committee was looking at it, we didn't ask them to vote or come to a consensus on changes. What we wanted was their discussion, and we didn't try to ask them to come to an agreement. And what we did was in the comments, in the margin, we put comments. It may be one council member said this and another council member felt another way. That way you could understand the full extent of their conversation. There are 7 divisions: meetings, policies and operating procedures, council and citizen committees, council directives and executive limitations, communications, ethics, and enforcement and administration. The largest division is the first one, meetings, and I hope that we will be able to get through that one at least today. And I'm sorry, I left out on this, that before we even start Division 1, there is a section called the preface, and we will start with that. And I think before we go through this, we need to discuss how you want to proceed, council. I intend to go through this section by section because I think we need to discuss it that way. Some of the sections are very simple and it's very similar or identical to what we've had, and it shouldn't take a lot of discussion, but some of them are fairly comprehensive. And Mayor, do you think that we need to reach a consensus on each section before we move on?
Because that's why I kind of mentioned we all had an opportunity to look at it, and maybe if the council permits, I mean, it's up to you if you guys want to go section by section, but go on some of the major changes that have happened, some of the discussion items that you guys had in the committee. I think those are more important because everything else, from what I read through it, a lot of that stuff is similar to what we have already. Mm-hmm. And there ain't no sense in going through all that, just going through the major stuff, right? Everybody okay with that, or?
Section by section.
Section by section.
I gotta ask
You guys got to read. I'm a reader, so. All right, go ahead. Section by section, overruled by me.
All right. And actually, preface is where we will start. The committee did have a comment on that. So the main part that I think we should talk about are the bullet points under where it says the members of the Killeen City Council will. And as written, it said, trust and respect the opinions of fellow council members, be well informed on the issues, and participate in the deliberations of council. The committee felt that trust and should be removed, and that sentence should start with, council will respect the opinions of fellow council members.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Okry?
Yes, with that, how is this enforceable? How are we going to enforce that?
There's rules in there that tells you how all that is enforced. Right there, it talks about the chair, talks about the chair correcting it, so that's in there too. And the chair making note that this is your error.
No, I think you misunderstand what I'm saying. To trust and respect somebody,
Oh,
how are we gonna?
what you mean is, how do you know if they've been
No,
respected?
how are you gonna enforce that?
I can address that, I think. And the preface is not so much the rules, but it's the overarching feeling, I guess, or what council wants to operate under, and its aspirational goals. And I don't really think that it would be enforceable if you can say whether someone does or doesn't respect another council member's opinions. But I think that these are the general aspirational goals that you will intend to follow whenever you're interacting with each other as council members and with the public and staff.
Also, bullet number 3, where it talks about provide appropriate notification to the mayor or city manager of an absence as soon as possible prior to meeting time.
Of a what? Of an absent?
Yes. What I think is, I don't work for you. I work for the electors. So if I'm not here, I don't report to you, neither does the mayor report to any member of this council.
So you're saying that's more of a courtesy than a
Yeah,
requirement?
that's a
That should be a
courtesy.
courtesy. And some of that thing, maybe that's what we need to distinguish,
We
because
need to distinguish
as a
that.
courtesy, you're informing the body not to wait. We're going to continue on without
Yes,
you.
we all know what times, meetings and everything, so we
But
don't work.
what you're saying is you don't
We
have
don't
to.
work for we don't work for anyone, we work for the voters.
That's fine. So can we change it to mean as a courtesy or something versus,
Sure, we
As a
can change it to
requirement.
say whatever you want.
there you go.
So say, as a courtesy, provide appropriate notification? or-
Yeah. Is that all right? As a courtesy, everybody okay with it? Instead of just provide it, it's just as a courtesy, the council member will inform the chair.
Well, it's the thing, I don't owe you anything.
You don't.
We don't owe anybody anything. All we know is that it takes a 4 to call a county meeting, to call a meeting. We all know what time we need to be here.
No, I
So
understand.
far as you working, me working, or a council member working for you, or vice versa, that whole paradigm is jacked.
I
Because
think-
we don't work for each other. We work with each other, and we know the roles for each one, but it's to say that I need to call you and give you, I don't need to give you a courtesy on anything.
No, and I want to take that a step further, because I think you can say that about just about everything in here. And that's why, as a council, we're coming, because we're creating our own rules. So remember what she said, this is our rules. So, I mean, you can probably say that about this whole document, because there's nothing in there that requires us to do any of that stuff in here. And so we're just creating a standard. I mean, whether we agree for it or not, that's why we're here. And so there's no law that's going to make us do any of this stuff. So as a body, we're coming together and saying, these are the rules we want established for us.
Well,
Mr. Johnson?
I'm just trying to say, we putting it, you writing it down, and there, again, there's something, you can't enforce that.
Yeah.
There's no way, because what you gonna do, censor somebody? No, you can't.
No.
We're elected. Only the people
No, I agree.
can do it. So to even go that route, we standards of ethics, we sign those.
No, I agree. I agree.
Oh,
These are
so-
just let's look at them as, as, I don't know, guidelines or something. I mean, these are rules that we're trying to establish as a body to try to get some order. Otherwise, we have disorder, and we don't want to live by disorder. We want to kind of have some kind of order. We're ruling, we're guiding ourselves, that's it. Mr. Johnson?
Is there a way to change the word will to should strive to? And I think that'll clear everything up.
Strive to?
Should strive to instead of will.
I would say just as a courtesy, that's it.
I don't work for you.
No, I'm saying all of it. Right here
You
where it
need to
says-
understand that.
where it says
But
members-
you don't have to. As a courtesy, you don't have to.
We don't have to do anything. Nothing.
So what do we say? Just throw them all out?
No, I'm saying,
Follow Robert Rules of Order.
So we don't have to do none of this stuff.
Mayor, all I'm asking is that instead of saying members of the Killeen City Council will, Councilman Okray is correct. I'm just saying change the word into should strive to, or
It's up to you.
That way it's
Stride, everybody said stride.
strive to on all of those. And
We
that's-
will strive to create all these rules. Let's just put stride on all of them, so. The box is out. All right, well, let's continue on. Let's try to continue on and see how far we can get.
Well, I don't really understand where we are, honestly. So what are we doing with this first section?
Well, you had one that was against, but, again, we speak as a body. And so Mr. Okry was against, but do we have any other objections? Because again, the majority rules. So that was one objection, but I didn't see anybody else. So we're assuming that that's okay?
Change the word will.
To strive, yeah.
To stride.
Should
Is everybody
strive
else
to.
okay with stride? Mrs. Nash King?
Sir, thank you, Mr. Mayor. When Mr. Okay was talking about the notification, is that where we at? Are we talking about where are we? Are we talking about just that part that we disagree
Just
on?
that part. Just that part about notifying if you're not going to be here. That's it.
I just say a common courtesy. Just courtesy, just to let the mayor know.
That's it.
Say we'll strive to exercise.
Do we want to take that part out and you don't have to tell me anything? How's that?
Yeah, that's true.
Just don't show up. And we're moving on without you.
Yeah.
Mayor.
Just get rid of it, yeah.
All right, hold on. Mr. Johnson, go ahead.
I'm saying at the top for all of those, the members of the Killeen City Council should strive to, and then just have them right there.
Is that all right with everybody?
It'll provide us with moving room where no one's in control, you're not controlling us. We can strive to.
So are you okay with the fact that one of those bullets says is will not disclose information which is confidential? So you will strive to not disclose confidential information? That's how that will read?
Well, something's better than nothing, so where are we at?
You stride.
We haven't even passed go yet.
Yep. This is the
Councilmember
preface.
All right.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Okry,
yeah, for the record, I don't work for any of you.
I got that.
For the record,
We
I
got
don't
it.
work for you.
All right.
I work for the people.
We all do.
So I don't need you to tell me what to do. I know what to do.
No, we got it. And we're not trying to tell you. We're speaking as a majority. Remind you again, you can have different opinions, but we speak as a whole. So if one person doesn't agree and the majority does, or the majority agrees, then we'll go a different route. So, I mean, we just need a consensus. Do we want to change this or not, or just keep going with this? Mr. Kilpatrick?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe in the meetings continued, the item on 1-70, general procedures, Alpha A, I don't know which, it's my first slide.
Right, we're on the preface right now, which is before the meeting section.
Yes, ma'am. Well, if you flip the next slide, I think that this will clarify. A, the second A, there's A and then A, but that second A, rules of parliamentary procedure are meant as guidelines and tool and will not limit council's inherent power and general legal authority. What we're talking about is just a common decency, that anytime, if we have committees and you can't be there, normally it is a common courtesy to notify the chair that you're not going to be there. Because if if we have a transportation committee meeting and there's 3 council members on it, and 2 of those council members cannot be there, why do we want to bring everybody, the staff, into when there's not a quorum for us to meet? Therefore, it's common courtesy to call the chair and say, I'm not going to be able to be there. That would be the very same thing, and I would take it, that the council as a body, as a courtesy, you would let the chair, not talking working for the mayor, not working for the chair, but you would let the chair understand, I'm not going to be here. Mr. Rivera says, I'm not going to be here. Mr. Harris says, I'm not going to be here. Ms. Fleming's not going to be here. There is no quorum for that meeting. So why would we, at that point in time, want to bring the total assembled everybody in this room together when we know we're not going to have a quorum for that meeting. That's a common courtesy, not a requirement. I don't work for him. I don't have to do that. But that's all we're asking for. You still have the limit, we do not limit the council's inherent power and their general legal authority. It's just a piece of paper that says this is courtesy.
What we need to do, we need to just vote section by section. That's the only way we're going to do it. So Mr. Okry, if you don't like it, make a recommendation, and we'll get a consensus, whether yea or nay, and that's it.
I don't, Mr. Mayor, I don't have a recommendation. And I've yet to see a day or time when the council did not meet because it did not have a quorum.
Yeah.
And likewise, if you're on a committee, the section, I believe, 1-118, we have provisions for that if you don't show up for 2 meetings.
It's all there.
It's all there, so I don't know what we have here. This is extra.
So how would
This
you
is
like
extra.
us to, what is the recommendation for that, and then see if we get a consensus on it? You want to take that out completely,
I don't think we
change
need
it, take it out?
I don't think we need it, because
So recommendation to take that part out. Is that okay? Mrs. Nash King, Mr. Kilpatrick?
No.
No. Mrs. Fleming? Take it out. Take it out. We got 2, 3. Mr. Johnson, take it out, leave it.
Leave it in there, but it's the wheel I still have concern with.
So we got, Mr. Harris is not here. Mr. Rivera, leave it in there, take it out.
I would take it out to all this mess.
Take it out. I think we got 4 there, so Mrs. Davis?
I know when I'm gonna be. If
That
I'm
part we
going to
gotta-
a committee, I just gotta be there.
Hold on, I'm sorry. Take out what?
Take that part out.
Which part? The whole preface?
Yeah,
Okay.
about the, having to let the mayor know where they're at.
Oh, so everything else stays and just take
Yeah,
out,
just that
provide
part.
appropriate notification?
Just that part.
Okay.
So now we can move on to the next one.
And what about will it still say will, or should it say should strive to?
No, we took it all out.
So the whole section, not just that one bullet?
Yeah.
Okay. The whole preface,
That part about,
or?
Oh, I'm confused. Are we talking about one section, or are we talking about the whole page?
I'm confused too.
that preference here.
I just realized that the versions that were made don't include the
I have
odd
it, I
pages,
can't
but
find
the one that's online should have everything.
Yeah, so that actually raises a question
Yes.
in my mind, whether we should continue. It appears as if you only have half the document. My version of the document only has odd pages. It doesn't have any even pages to it. Is that true of all of your copies?
The online one
Yes.
has it. But the
1,
hard copies that were handed
3,
out, yes.
5.
The version online.
All right, so if you read the online version, you probably got the whole thing. If you read the hard copy, you only got half of the document.
And that's the one that was just handed out today. The version that was handed out 2 weeks ago was the entire one.
Mrs. Nash King.
Recommend that we do this at a later date.
We'll say the same thing. I second.
Yeah, let's table this.
Well, let's table it.
I second
table
that
it.
too. I
And
second that.
now, with that said, this is, this came from the city manager. He was, he had asked me, because I know that when we discussed doing this before, we said, as part of the rules, because it needs to be updated every time there's a new council seated. And so he recommended that, we do this after the new council meeting. But then I said, no, let's do it now because you guys, my feeling was you guys are it. But I think that we're probably better off going with the city manager's recommendation when you get a new city, because the policy in itself is going to say that once a new council member is seated, then we have to review it again. And so it doesn't make sense to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and follow the city manager's recommendation, and I say we just postpone it until after the election. So with that, Mr. Johnson?
Just a comment to city staff that did a lot of work. I know I didn't agree on everything. I think my pages are all lit up here, but I just appreciate the work that you all done thus far.
Definitely.
So if I shall return,
I
I'd
don't,
be ready to talk about it.
I don't intend to let this go. I mean, there's too much work in it, and I think it's too important. It needs to come back for discussion.
It does.
Mr. Oakley,
Yes, I got a good bloody copy. So I know I won't be back, but I will be back.
you'll be back. You'll be back. All right. With that, we're just going to go ahead and move on to our next items. And that is council member request of future agenda items. RQ 18-003. And number one is request traffic study for Bunny Trail. Mr. Harris, that's you.
Yes. On the request for the traffic study for Bunny Trail, let's see, I have a few people, I think one or two rather, who would like to come speak on that particular one. But before they do, I want to let them speak actually when I come to the Alamocitos one. But the traffic study on Bunny Trail needs to be done because even with the addition of the new middle school, Smith, I've been getting a lot of complaints about the amount of traffic that's been accumulated in the area lately, and it's been pretty congested out there. And I think another traffic study needs to be done just to see if we need to put some lights out there because, you know, a whole new, if you want to say a whole new population of people are coming to that area now because of the second middle school. Because you had the elementary school initially, now you have the middle school. And we know how many people that middle school holds between buses and individual cars and walkers. And so I think that needs to be addressed.
So you're just requesting a traffic study? You're not requesting anything other than just, you know?
Well, the traffic study to determine whether or not we need to put up some street lights, some traffic lights up there to help smooth the flow of traffic going through that particular street.
Because that's, and I think the same guy called me, and his was a different explanation. It wasn't traffic, it was exits and, you know.
Okay, that's for the Alamocitos.
Yeah, that's a different, and there's really nothing we can do to that right now because you can't change the exits of the subdivision. But in your case, is that something that everybody feels we can do? Because the reason we put these items on here is because this is something that requires staff time and staff, you know, to do. And as an individual, we cannot do that. We speak as a body. So if that's something everybody feels that we can direct the staff to do, by all means. So that's why we put that. Mr. Rivera?
Mr. Rivera, I was in Bunny Trail this weekend, and let me tell you, I believe we should do that study.
Yeah,
People
that's why we're
running
here.
like that like crazy, like there's no tomorrow. And there's something to be done that I don't know what it is. I don't think a traffic light is the issue, but Bunny Trail is getting to be a very dangerous road.
So do we have a consensus for that? Mr. Oakley?
And not only Bunny Trail,
Yes,
but other places.
right,
I mean,
right.
it's just, I talk to people consistently, talk about even the traffic through the residences. And people, the first thing out, we want speed bumps.
Yeah.
But I think it might be something, we need to really do a study, or comprehensive, with Bunny Trail being a priority, but comprehensively, because maybe it can be solved through signage.
I agree.
Something needs to be done with that, because people, I see it even in my neighborhood. And it's pretty enclosed, and people come through there 40, above 40 miles an hour.
So I think I'm getting a yes. Ms. Nash King?
Mr. Olson, is there anything in place to do traffic studies throughout the city already put in place?
Limited, yes. We do have the ability to do some traffic studies. If it turns into a comprehensive citywide study, now we're talking about something different that probably needs to go through the budgeting process.
So we do have the resources to do Bunny Trail.
I believe we do.
Okay,
Yeah.
so yes.
So we're okay. I think we got a consensus to go ahead and do that, to direct Mr. City Manager, so he can direct his department to go ahead and do that. We okay with that?
Yes, sir.
All right, next one is review, what was it? Request briefing regarding Mohawk Road.
Yes. And if I could, I'd just like to have one of the citizens come up and speak real quickly.
Who?
With the approval of the council, just say some brief words.
It's not, Mr. Mayor, point of order, this is not an agenda item yet.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's
but
just-
we've had stuff before. Like I said, when people have come up, and so
Well,
you know.
what we're discussing is that whether we move this forward or.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I just wanted to, like I said, constituent comment real quickly, and so.
Mr. Rivera.
Now, this is dealing with the Alamocitos situation.
With all respect, I believe what Mr. Hawkey said, this is not an agenda item, but this is why we did this protocol in place. So we have a guide.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Mrs. Nash King.
I do want to hear what Mr. Harris has to say. I mean, what's,
No, this.
Yeah, before you bring up, you have
Yeah.
to bring that forward
Okay,
before you bring
want me to say it
anybody
first?
up and
Okay.
make it as an agenda item. Right now, we're deciding whether that item is going to be discussed.
Oh, yeah, definitely, but I was just, like I said, wanting, just wanting the proof of a citizen to come up and just say a few words regarding it, and then that would just kind of help as I guess if you want to say a reinforcement to me, saying, I believe this is a credible item that we should bring forward for discussion. And this is about the.
Well, you got to make your case first.
All right.
Make
Now-
your case.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to say this is what I said about protocol, but I will never turn down to hear a citizen when they or she want to speak.
Okay, well, let's see, we ain't going that far yet. You got to make your case.
So I'll say this, with the Alamocitos, like I was talking about a second road that was begun in the, I forget the name of the neighborhood, but it's the, off of the Alamocitos area neighborhood. And that particular development has up to or a little bit more than 500 homes, rooftops in that particular development, and only has one ingress and egress in the entire neighborhood. And I know, let's see, that constituents have been complaining about just that one entrance. And even so, with, I know on the news last night, I believe it was, they interviewed some of the constituents, and they talked about, the city response to it. And in some ways, I disagree with the city response to was being said, but they talked about a second road being opened up off of the Smith campus to another adjacent neighborhood, and I wouldn't consider that a second egress for, you have a whole new neighborhood, a whole different neighborhood over there, and expecting them to get over 500 rooftops, try to come through their neighborhood. Now, that's not, that road was created when Smith was created as well, but they basically have one ingress and one egress in that neighborhood, and they're looking for reasoning behind why the second one wasn't completed, and at the same time, I want to be able to look at and discuss and even review what, if anything, can possibly be done to get a second road, because a neighborhood with 500 rooftops is, from what I'm reading, is particularly a violation of our ordinance. It only has one ingress egress. So that's what that's the issue I'm bringing up. That's what I'm bringing up for discussion and review to see what, if anything, we have to do something, but what we can do about it and get that second road out there so the people can, because it's an emergency situation, like you're talking about with the duplexes. As small as that was, you have over 500 unit rooftop development with one. And so something definitely needs to be done, and that's why I'm bringing this forward for discussion, or for approval to be moved forward for discussion.
Is this something, Mr. City Manager, that maybe somebody from the department can just go out there and take a look at that and see, if there's something that can be brought forward? Because it might be where, when you look at it and it's like, okay, there's really nothing you can do. It's something that we have to do as development progresses. But is this something that maybe somebody from a department can just look at it?
Yes. And if the council decides to go ahead and have a future discussion about it, I would anticipate doing a staff report where we've formally
something
done
like
that
that,
and report
formally.
back to the council.
I think that's better, because right now, we just need the staff's input back.
Well, because, and I agree with that. Like I said, we said if we vote to move it forward for discussion, then, of course, he said then we can actually do that. So that's why I recommend that we do move this forward for discussion.
And you did it the right way. I'm not saying it's just, that's why you come here, so that, you can't just tell the staff. So you come before the
Oh, I
council.
know that. Oh, yeah, definitely. Oh, yeah.
Now,
That's why I'm
at
bringing
least
it
you
forward.
let the council, and I think that you have the permission to at least ask and work with the staff, and just maybe they can just take a look at it.
But let's see, at the same time, though, I would still, if the majority of the council approves, I would still like to allow the citizen to speak real quickly. Okay, so we have, yes.
I have a question to Mr. Mayor.
Mrs. Nashke.
Is that area still being developed by the developer?
No, it's done. Yep, and as far as the second road has started to a small degree, but a roadblock sign has been, the one of the barriers has been put up because, in the beginning, people were still traveling that road and still coming out down on the other side, but the city eventually put a barrier in front of it, so that wouldn't happen anymore. So but the original, like I said, this all come in discussion, but the original.
But again, we don't want to discuss it
Yes, that's what I'm
here.
talking about. It'll all come into regular
We just
discussion.
want them,
Yeah.
because I can tell you, I can name several areas that have the same problem, and Stagecoach on Deerwood is a huge area and only has one exit and entrance. So there's many areas in Killeen that are similar like that, so.
Because I know our.
Mayor, point of order, call for the consensus.
I still, like I said, I still request that, like I said, from the council.
Okay, we got a consensus to, this is not a public hearing, but he requests a citizen, and I think I see Mr. Oakley said no, Ms. Nashke said no. Ms. Kilpatrick, I think,
I didn't say no.
oh, I thought you said no.
Yes, she's here, so.
Oh, okay.
My point of order is not to continue on. The point of order I'd like to rule on, Mr. Mayor, is to call for a consensus whether we want this to be on a future agenda.
Okay, point of order taken. Do we want to put it on the agenda?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Good job, we got it.
Therefore, we don't need any further, at the next
Discussion on it.
body, when we get it on.
It'll be on the agenda.
Then,
Okay.
then that would be the appropriate time to have somebody come in.
But,
All right, well, thank you for coming, but you
Yeah,
can
so-
speak on them after the meeting, you can speak to, yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I want to go ahead and let her, still speak now because she's been waiting here all this time. And so that'll just be a courtesy from us to allow her to do that. Yeah. And so she only has 3 minutes. So, we've been here all this time. So 3 more minutes is not going to knock anybody out.
It's a process, though, that I'm making the point of order on.
Yeah,
The
we
process,
have-
if we do this, Mr. Mayor,
I got
we'll
it.
continue every session having 5 and 6 people coming up to talk.
But we
and
don't do it every
continue on.
we don't do it every session.
All right, that's it. No, I'm sorry.
But the council
We
voted
got
for
to
it.
follow protocol.
The majority of the council said yes, though. Majority of the council said
Mrs.
yes.
Davis, how do you do this? We let them talk or not? It's something.
Majority of the council said yes.
I just want to make sure we're following protocol.
Yeah, so we have
Right,
4.
council, I'm going to let you guys decide. Mr. Rivera, do you want public to speak?
She's been here for 3 hours.
It's been all day long here. so
All right.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Do it. Go ahead. Go ahead, ma'am.
My name is Linda Spot Corrupt. I live in the Goodnight Ranch neighborhood and off the Alamocetos Creek. I'm actually on Montague County Drive. I live in basically the back end of this development. And each morning, at least Monday through Thursday, I take my granddaughter, who's been sitting back there somewhat patiently as well, waiting for me to be able to speak on this. I take her to school in the mornings. If I don't leave my house, now it is probably less than 1.5 miles from the back of that development over to Haynes Elementary. If I do not leave my house by 7 o'clock approximately, a few minutes after, she does not get to school on time. At the early bell rings at 7:25. Now, why should it take me 25 minutes to get out of my neighborhood? Some mornings I have to literally park on Brushy Creek and virtually run her down to Bunny Trail and around the corner and over across the street to get into the school. Basically, I had written this on our discussion in our Facebook page. It's horrible in the morning, especially between 6:55 until about 7:40 a.m. To try to get out of the Alamocetos Creek section of the Goodnight Ranch neighborhood, well over 500 homes. I believe my granddaughter and I counted 532 homes in that neighborhood. On multiple streets, I counted them as we were always sitting here waiting. There are 9 streets that run parallel to Alamocetos Creek. and 3, I believe it is, that run the opposite direction. Brushy Creek runs the width of the neighborhood, as does Castle Gap, which runs in the back of the neighborhood. The only way to get in and out is to come down to Brushy Creek, over to Alamocitos, and down Alamocitos to Bunny Trail, unless you can get out through the Smith Middle School, which is not a thing either. Now, you scheduled both of the schools to start at the same time, which makes it, compounds the issue even more. I had hoped that when they built they actually connected Brushy Creek through over to the middle school, that we'd be able to use that as another outlet to get out of the neighborhood. There are people that live in the neighborhood. We've only lived there for a year, less than a year. And there are people that have lived in this neighborhood for over, I think, 8 years is when they first started this neighborhood. And their understanding is that that other street was supposed to have gone through when they were building the neighborhood. That hasn't been done.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Your time's up.
And we're
I'm
just
sorry.
pleading for you to do something before
Appreciate it.
something extravagant happens.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that was our last item.
Second.
Motion to adjourn by Mr. Kilpatrick, second by Nash King. All those in favor, just say aye. Aye. Adjourn. Thank you.